I will call everyone to order and welcome you all to this meeting this afternoon on this gorgeous spring afternoon. Don't we all wish we could be outside for this one? Welcome to those who are joining us online or through Over Rogers. And we have a number of folks who are virtually in attendance today as well. So welcome to you, welcome to council and staff. We have quorum and a full house with all of our councillors in attendance. So with that, I will call this meeting to order and ask you to join me in a moment of reflection as we consider the business of the corporation. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of interest at this time, knowing that if something should arise during the process, we can declare at that time? Deputy Mayor.
Worship, thank you. And I will need to declare on item 8G. My husband had sold Ms. Evans that piece of property, so we'll declare on that issue.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. All right. Sorry, I'm juggling three screens here. Okay. With that, we'll move into announcements. I have a couple that I wanted to bring to everyone's attention. The first is that at the end of the council meeting on March the 8th, council went into closed session to discuss the 2020 legal status updates. And at that time, we gave direction to staff to proceed participating in the LPAT tribunal hearing that is currently underway. Staff attendance at that meeting included the CAO, the treasurer, and the clerk. And that was all that was discussed at that closed session meeting. The next announcement I wanted to bring to everyone's attention is our vaccination process. We were talking about this a little earlier as before we began the meeting. But vaccines were administered last week to over 400 of our senior residents over the age of 80 at the clinic set up in the Meaford and St. Vincent Community Center. And by all accounts, our clinic ran smoothly and efficiently, and we're so grateful to all of the medical personnel as well as the volunteers who assisted in coordinating the appointments. Another clinic will be coming soon to catch up more of the over 80 priority group and then move into the subsequent age groups as our vaccines are delivered. There is a number of, if you are over 80 but do not have a local doctor, you may register online at www.ontario.ca/bookvaccine. Or if you don't have internet connection, you may also call 1-833-943-3900. The second announcement I have is regarding our well-being plan. There will be a virtual consultation on March the 31st at 6:30 p.m. This session will be held over Zoom and will provide residents and local service providers with the opportunity to learn about the development of the well-being plan and to submit their feedback or questions on strategies for action that will be proposed within the final plan. I would encourage everyone to register for the event or for further information to contact meaford.ca/wellbeing. Also in conjunction with that, there is our second survey has been released now and is available all online, again, by visiting meaford.ca/wellbeing. Or residents without an access to the internet can contact us by phone and 538-1060 extension 1110 to arrange for a hard copy. This survey provides you with the opportunity to learn more about the 5 areas of focus for the plan, which are mental health, poverty and income, crime prevention, seniors issues, and youth issues as well. This information coming back into the wellbeing plan is anonymous, and we really appreciate everyone submitting feedback on ways to target these issues locally. That's all of the announcements I have. Is there anything from council? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. And I just wanted to mention on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce that their AGM is coming up on April the 26th at 6 p.m. It will be a virtual event, and the guest speaker will be Dr. Ian Era from our Grey Bruce Health Unit. And if anyone is interested in joining that event, to get in touch with the Chamber to get the Zoom information. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further from council for announcements? And seeing none at this time, we will move into public participation. Even though we're virtual, we certainly encourage folks to join us and to stay engaged and participate at council and provide council with their comments and questions going forward. As I said, it is virtual for a while until we're certain that we can reconvene in person. But if you wish to make a deputation on items on the council or ask a question, we ask that you please get in touch with the clerk's office and before 10 a.m. on the day of the agenda or of the meeting. So I also want to encourage folks who cannot attend to watch this meeting via live. The Municipality of Meaford's YouTube channel at meaford.ca/YouTube. And we are being filmed by Rogers as well. With that, we have a presentation this afternoon from Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Grey Bruce. And I will welcome Andy McKee and Mandi Lamb. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Clumpus and the rest of the council. I'm sure, can you hear me?
Yes, fine, thank you.
Okay, good. And my name's Andy McKee, and I've been involved in Big Brothers Big Sisters for 28 years or so, and 20 of those I've been president. So as most of you probably know, we've expanded our service from Owen Sound to most of Grey Bruce. And so that's really the purpose of us speaking with you today, is to boost our awareness of our agency and how our programs strengthen communities through helping the children and their families. So with that, I'll introduce Mandi Lamb, who is our full-time mentorship coordinator and does a wonderful job with matching and looking after the bigs and littles. And she will give you a short presentation on who we are and what we do.
Thank you, Andy. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we're fine. And Mandi, thanks. Please go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor Clumpus and Council for having us today. So yeah, if you could just go to the next slide, please. So this slide is really just a quick overview of who Big Brothers Big Sisters is nationally. So in 1903 is when the national organization was established. And in Owen Sound, locally, we've been running programs since 1960. We look a little different and we serve some different populations now, but in theory, that's kind of when we started in this area. And we really just believe that every child and youth should have someone standing with them as they become, members of the community and as they grow as individuals. Next slide, please. So our programs, the one-to-one program is the one that most people are familiar with. So that's when a big brother or sister meets with their little brother or sister for at least an hour a week, ideally 8 hours a month, whatever it looks like in the world of shift work and all of those good things. And they hang out and do fun things together. Couples match is essentially the same thing, except it's a couple matched with the little brother or sister. In-school mentoring is a program where the big brother or sister goes into the school and spends an hour a week at school, doing typically non-academic things. Sometimes we do group programs in that as well. And then Big Bunch is a chance for us to get everybody together. So all of our matched bigs and littles get together once a month, and we plan an event or an outing that we can do. And it also helps us to make sure that the youth on our wait list have a chance to participate as well while they're waiting to be matched with their big brother or sister. Next slide, please. Regardless of which one of those programs you're participating in, the goal is always the same, that we want the big and little to create that trusting relationship, that friendship, and we're empowering the youth really to make decisions, to learn what it means to be a responsible part of society, to give back. We watch them as they grow, build their self-esteem, they become who they're going to be, and they grow in their confidence. Next slide, please. So our littles, the youth that are matched with a big, they're between 6 and 16 years old. And then our bigs are over 18, unless you are a big in the in-school program, in which case you can be 17 when you start that program. As Andy said, we serve most of Grey and Bruce counties now. These are our local numbers throughout Grey and Bruce, but I did pull Meaford specific numbers today, and we have 4 bigs that are in Meaford. We have 9 littles, and we have 4 active matches where the 3 of those, the big and little, are from Meaford, and one of them, the big, is in Meaford and the little is in Owen Sound. Next slide, please. So again, when a match is put together, sort of, the big and little meet on a regular basis. So I introduce the big and little, and then they kind of take it from there, and they meet regularly, consistently. They go to Harrison Park. So the picture on the left there, they're at Harrison Park checking out the birds. And on the right was our Christmas party at the YMCA, and we were playing some basketball at the end of the party. So we really just try to do things where we can enjoy Grey and Bruce counties, the nature, lots of crafting, lots of baking, things like that. Program staff, so my job is to be here to support the bigs, the littles, and their family. And we really just make sure parents and guardians are an active part of the match as well. And we talk about boundaries and ensure that everyone's feeling safe and happy. Next slide. So the mentoring effect, this is a study that the national office did, and it's just really a nice way to show in some concise numbers that mentoring is important and mentoring works. So when we have caring adults in our lives, we have the benefit of, a circle of people that hold us up and really can encourage and support us. So the study showed that 52% of the youth that were mentored were less likely to skip school. Boys and girls were 2.5 times more likely to actually enjoy school and think that it was important and encouraging to be part of that space. Next slide, please. Also, less risky behaviors in the youth that had mentors in their lives. So less likely to lose their temper, bully, fight, lie, cheat. That's both in girls and boys. And teens were less likely to engage in those activities like binge drinking, drug use, alcohol use. And my favorite numbers are on the next slide, please. These are the numbers that show that having that caring adult really encourages youth and supports their mental health and their future success. So 92% of the youth felt confident, and 96% of them said that they were happy. 87% had strong social networks around them. They made more money, and they held senior leadership positions. Almost half of them were in senior leadership. So that is an amazing number as well. And you can all be part of that. On the next slide, you can see how you can ignite potential and be the spark in a youth's life and really see and watch how exciting it is to to hear what they have to offer the world and see them grow. And that's the end of the presentation, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mandi. That is a very, very worthwhile organization for sure. It's good to hear the numbers that you've got and the influence that your bigs have on the lives of the littles as they move through this. I believe you have an event coming up soon, do you not? Bowl for kids?
We do.
Yes.
Andy, do you want to take that one?
Well, sure. Yeah, it's been our traditionally our biggest fundraiser of the year. However, with COVID, it's last year we just got it in right under the wire, fortunately. But this year it's usually the first Saturday in March, but this year we postponed it till April. Well, I think from 22nd to the 25th is the in-person bowling. There's restricted numbers at the bowling alley, but people can go if they wish. They've modified it for COVID. And also this year, as we're doing virtual bowling as well. So people can do the Wii bowling. They can set up a bowling alley in their kitchen. They can go quite creative as far as that goes, and get pledges and just send us pictures and what have you. So hopefully that becomes popular, and that starts the 10th of April, Mandi?
You got it.
Yeah, I think so. So anyway, so we're plugging ahead, and we're hopefully we get a good response for that, because we need the funds, of course. So if you have any other questions, let me know.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Mandi, for your presentation. And Andy, it's always nice to hear you. I was going to bring up the bowl-a-thon, so I'll just put out a challenge here to all council and anybody else listening today to put a pledge in. I've already put my pledge in with Mark Perry, so there's other people who take it. I'm putting a challenge out here to everybody on the thing today to put a pledge into the Big Brothers and Sisters. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bartley. I knew that would come up. Councillor Kenter.
Yes, thank you through your worship. Hi, Andy. And
Hi, Russ.
I just wanted to ask a question here. It looks to me by the numbers as if you have twice as many candidates than actual volunteers in Meaford. Is that correct?
It is. And part of that is because some of those littles are signed up in the in-school program in Meaford. Georgian Bay Community School is one of the biggest programs we have for the in-school. And because we couldn't get into the school this year due to COVID, that is why. However, we always need bigs, and we always have littles that are coming out. So absolutely, if you or somebody else would like to be a big, please reach out, call the office, send me an email, go on the website, and we can hook you up with a little brother or sister.
Do you want to give a phone number now when you have a chance?
I would love to. 519-376-4449.
Thank you for that. Councillor Vickers.
Through your worship, I'd just like to say thank you to Maddie and Andy also, and I will take up Councillor Bartley's challenge, and I will make a donation to the bowl-a-thon through Mark's efforts. So I just like to say that, and I'd like to say thank you to the two of you for coming and giving us a little bit more information. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Councillor Vickers. I think we've all contributed to Mark Perry's efforts over the years, and at one time even had our own team involved from council when we could bowl actually here in our own little community. But we wish you the best of luck with that event, that happy event. Certainly, I'll be supporting it as well. And thank you so much for your presentation. Good luck with that, and we hope that you find some very nice matches coming up.
Thank you very much.
Just one more question. I wonder if it would be, if you could put a link to our website on your website. That might be helpful for people to get information. All the bowling information is on our website, so if that, I don't know if that can be done on your community chapter or whatever you have, but it might be helpful.
I'll turn you over to Margaret for that. She'll contact with you for further information.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Have a good day.
Moving on now, we have a deputation on the agenda item. And I will welcome Suresh and the folks from LC Development who are joining him today. So up to you.
Excuse me, Mayor Clumpus. Sorry, I think we're actually going to start with the three residents who are registered first. I think they were first on your sheet.
I beg your pardon. Now I have to change here. Okay, the three residents, we have Rick Riordan first. Rick, the floor is yours.
Your Worship, Deputy Mayor Keaveney and Council, my name is Rick Riordan. My wife Cheryl and I have recently made Meaford our home, moving from the GTA. By way of further introduction, I represent a new movement of Meaford residents for good growth, who are committed to advocating on behalf of our community for quality build projects that complement the lifestyle needs and character of our waterfront community. Respectfully, Loon call was a wake-up call for many concerned residents who wanted to see good planning principles acted upon for all future developments in Meaford. My professional experience is design and communications. In today's deputation, I'm primarily focused on communication. Ironically, it came to our attention this weekend in a Zoom meeting that the town contracted Letter M Marketing last September as consultants to produce a communication strategy for the town of Meaford. Had we been aware of this work, many of us would have loved to have participated in the process. I've reviewed their 6-page communication strategy update and believe that it resonates with our own group's observations about the need for improving communication between the residents, council, and staff. Change is no longer coming to Meaford, it's here. As a group of concerned residents, we want to be informed and involved, to think critically, listen closely, and inquire openly, seeking to understand and assist the processes that shape our community for the future. In this depute, there are 2 proposed recommendations I would like to put forward to council as it relates to development communication going forward. Firstly, the Meaford Town website. The town website needs significant improvements with respect to the accessibility of information important to the general public and more pedestrian language to improve comprehension. There is extensive information on the website, but it's currently something like find the Waldo to track down things one might not even be aware they should be looking for. Communication with the public sector is obscure. Time-sensitive information, including public meetings, are buried on the website. The majority of residents don't know what is going on until it's too late to engage in the process. Important and current highlights need to be elevated. Collateral information vehicles support the website, such as social media, e-blasts, or newsletter on matters of development can be improved. I'm sure Letter M will have recommendations of this nature in their report to the town. And I think secondly, larger site signage and legible notice from roadside on all developments. Specific uniform content and size criteria needs to be established. For example, the name of the developer and contact info, a large image of the proposed development featured, or an illustration or concept. Details provided on construction, completion dates projected and updated. This would be required at the earliest date of proposal, incumbent on the developer to provide, and prior to all formal public engagement. Georgian Bay Terrace and Meaford Haven have provided excellent examples of this type of signage appropriate for public notice on site. In addition, as residents for good growth, Here are some general concerns we'd like to table for council's consideration. And please keep in mind, we're still in the process of going through the vortex of data on the website, reports and info on committees, plans, the history of studies that Meaford has undertaken over the years in order to better understand our community and why we are where we currently are, so we can engage with council in an informed manner. That said, our first observations and experience so far would indicate that residents and entrepreneurs of the town of Meaford appear to be without a clear vision and blueprint for future growth and economic development, a vision specifically intended for the uniqueness of our waterfront community and our primary opportunities for tourism. Current criteria for community planning and development appears to be misaligned with Meaford's official plan. Although Meaford has been waiting years for development, rapid development appears to be taking precedent over good development. It would appear that Meaford does not have an official architectural plan for the community. Without specific guidelines, the character of Meaford will be determined and defined by what is most profitable for developers to build, and this is not ideal. The hope for growing our economy is heavily weighted on residential densification. Planning and development is narrowly focused on attainable housing rather than attracting a diverse socioeconomic balance of residents, professionals, and business entrepreneurs. A new precedent for zoning and market value for prime waterfront property has been set by neighboring communities along Georgian Bay. We need to update the vision for residential and public spaces along our waterfront lands. The proposed SkyDev development is of significant concern to many residents in our community. We believe Meaford residents deserve to feel proud about where they live. The apparent lack of vision and/or budgetary priority to maintain, preserve, and beautify public buildings and spaces needs to improve. On behalf of our group, I would request from council timelines on communication improvements. A few other questions. When do you plan to complete the OP review? How can we be involved? How do you plan to implement the recommendations for improved communication in response to the letter M marketing study you've contracted? And then in closing, we understand the official plan is to be updated shortly this year. However, we believe for elected officials and planning staff, accountability to the intent of its content remains relevant for decision-making and implementation now. So thank you for this opportunity to present these recommendations and concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Riordan. Second deputation for 5 minutes is Diane Hilliard. Diane, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Klumpus, Deputy Mayor Keaveney, and Town Council members. Thank you for allowing me the time today to share some thoughts with you. My name is Diane Hilliard, and when asked by our friends and family why we chose Meaford, I like to say that we didn't pick Meaford, Meaford picked us. To quote from the town's very own website, the municipality of Meaford is a fascinating four-season destination that has it all. Great live theater and concerts, fresh local food, unique shopping, nature at your doorstep, a beautiful harbor, and so much more. Of course we chose Meaford, but you all know this. And now it appears so do many, many others, most notably developers. Well, this is great news. Growth to a town is imperative, not just for municipal revenue streams, but to enhance our diversity, culture, and to help drive our economic success in the region. It creates a community of proud, caring, and active residents. This is prime time, Meaford, and we're on the verge of big growth. Today, I'm speaking to remind you, our elected representatives, staff, and our citizens, that we determine what is acceptable, and more importantly, what is desirable and appropriate development for our beautiful Meaford. We are in the driver's seat. Having worked as an executive in Toronto City Council staff for over 10 years, I was privy to many planning and development applications. And as such, I'm familiar with the Provincial Planning Act. And to quote directly from the Act, the noted purposes of the Act are, and I will quote, but note not limited to, Provide for planning processes that are fair by making them open, accessible, timely, and efficient. Recognize the decision-making authority and accountability of municipal councils in planning. But today my focus is on what I see as a critical point, and it states, to ensure the rights of local citizens to be notified about planning proposals, to give their views to their municipal council. This statement is a reminder that it is incumbent upon our councillors and mayor to remember that collectively you serve your constituents, not the developers. That asking for every opportunity for public input is not asking too much, but instead it's doing everything possible to ensure a robust discussion with the residents of this town to determine a clear vision of what is being proposed and what is best for our community. Under the Planning Act, when a developer comes to the town with its application, there is a radius for the written public notice to be distributed, and it sits at 120 meters. This is a minimum. In the city of Toronto, that covers a whole lot of houses. However, in most applications, the representing councillor still requests the developer to expand the area of notice to upwards of 500 meters. A written and mailed communication at the expense of the developer. It's just a cost of doing business, and it is within our right. The public notice goes to each and every resident within the scope, and it is often requested that the notice be shared with recognized community groups, homeowners associations, BIAs, etc. This ensures fulsome communication and the ability for those interested in the smart growth of their community can have a say. As we recently saw in the Loon Call development, I believe it was remiss of this council to have left the radius of notice distribution to the bare minimum of 120 meters. I am personally grateful to the residents, the group of residents who, contrary to the recent article in the Owen Sound Times, were able to effect a positive change in this proposal that otherwise would have never happened. They were late to the party, but boy, am I glad they were there. I, along with this group of concerned residents, respectfully request you, our elected representatives, to start the expanded inclusion process today. Start with the very next application that comes in. Look back at your recent submissions and exercise your power to empower your voters. I believe we all want good growth for Meaford, and how better to do it than together. The tagline for Meaford, love it here, it's not a dream, it's a home. What do you want your home to look like? Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Ms. Hilliard. Appreciate your coming and joining us today. Our third speaker is Catherine Cowell-Haggard. Catherine, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. My name is Catherine Cowell-Haggard, and I live at 159 Lakeshore Road South in Meaford. It's approximately 200 meters from the Loon Call development site. And I also learned about this development late in December 2020. My reason for appearing today is to obtain clarification on tree removal on the site. The site contains a significant number of mature trees. My understanding, having read the planning staff report of Mr. Armstrong, is that these trees located within the boundaries of the vegetation protection area and the environmental protection zone and hazard lands will not be removed when a tree preservation plan is to be prepared and approved by the municipality. The vegetation line around the perimeter of the site has more than an aesthetic function. Trees are important for the stormwater runoff, and they are an integral part of the treatment train for this stormwater runoff. And it's confirmed in both the developer's engineering report, the Pinestone engineering report submitted, and also in Mr. Armstrong's planning staff report. In other words, the mature trees, shrubs, grasses along the perimeter and in the hazard lands and in the site will help absorb and treat stormwater runoff from 200 new homes and driveways and roadways. And this water reaches our creek, the bay, and our drinking water. Beyond protecting trees in this zone at the perimeter, could you also please clarify today if the tree preservation plan includes trees in the study area located on the rest of the site? This includes the 12-meter wide green mews or walkway that you see that runs through the center of the site on the concept drawing. The green mews that connects the central playground and the stormwater management pond at the north end was added recently in discussion with residents, in part to preserve some of the tree canopy and also to improve the stormwater management function. The site should ideally be graded so the water collects towards this green mews and the material should be porous. So I'd like to ask what controls are put in place to ensure the tree preservation plan will be submitted once detailed site grading plans are completed. Is there a protocol for the sort of fencing and protective materials used to surround, protect the trees, their root systems during grading and construction so that they aren't damaged? And most importantly, how will the prohibition on removal of trees prior to completion of an approved tree preservation plan be enforced? We've seen in the past, unfortunately, that some developers in their haste to get ready for construction move to remove trees or clear cut their sites prior to the approval of a tree preservation plan. In the Loon Call development, the number and location of the trees on site have not yet been established. We just have the concept plan. At this point, after so much work, removing any of the trees would be devastating. I've taken the liberty of writing to the upper tier municipality, Grey County, to request an approved tree protection plan be made a condition of draft plan approval, and that the approved tree preservation plan be filed prior to the issuance of any tree cutting permits for this site. May I request that the municipality of Meaford also make these requests to the upper tier municipality? Finally, I would respectfully request that this council ask the owner developer to undertake today publicly that he will not remove any trees until the tree preservation plan approved by the municipality is in place. Will the council please request this undertaking today? Thank you, and this concludes my comments, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Catherine. I appreciate you attending and your comments as well. And I guess that brings us to Suresh and the representatives from LC Development Group for our fourth presentation today. Suresh, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yes, I've had discussions with Mr. Armstrong regarding the tree preservation plan, and it is not our intention to remove trees until the appropriate time. Clearing and grubbing sites are very expensive. We don't mobilize twice, and we do not move forward until we actually have all of our engineering and all of our servicing agreements in place. So that would not happen. And as discussed with Mr. Armstrong, the tree preservation plan that we would agree to would obviously permit us to complete the development per the concept plan that we that's before you today. There have been a lot of comments today about notice and who the waterfront community and tourism and architectural design and various things that yes, definitely it represent good planning. And I'm a little dismayed by the fact that none of the comments today circled around the importance of providing affordable, attainable ownership housing to the people that actually live and work, provide services, the teachers, the various people who are not professionals, who are not moving from the GTA, who are not people who are going to be moving into the waterfront community. I'm talking about the people who can only, who are unable to afford that type of product. You know, as part of our discussions with our neighbors, we ended up switching 35 small lot singles into 23 50 to 60 foot singles. And this was meant to appease our neighbors. Now we all know that Meaford is a community of a lot of large lots with a spattering of smaller townhomes, throughout the community that work quite well. And it's basically a mosaic where you have large lots beside townhome lots, and it works quite well. Now, in moving forward and us making that switch from the 35 single lots, we feel, and still do feel, of course we've agreed to it, that simply erodes attainability in your community. What that means is the people who are going to buy our townhomes or our semis, or who own townhomes or less expensive homes, are going to have a harder time taking that next step to get to a single family home. And these lots that I'm referring to are not visible from outside of our community. There's a lot of trees protecting these particular homes from the homes in the Algonquin subdivision. And there's another example where there's a real mix of sizes of lots in a community there. And I'm going to move forward again to this attainability question. I simply don't understand what the expectation is from a lot of residents talking to the waterfront community, talking to tourism. Where are the people that provide these services who live and work currently in the broader area of Meaford? Where are they going to live? I am unaware in the greater in Grey Bruce of any attainable ownership housing developments that are coming on stream. You know, in February of 2020, the average house price in Grey Bruce was $400,500. 12 months later, it's $613,400. That's a 53% increase in cost for a home in 1 year. As a private developer, the only thing I can do, with the exception of getting assistance from the government, we're having government intervention, which is something we don't ask for, is to provide homes that are attainable. And the single biggest thing that affords us that ability is through intensification. There is no other way. We need to maximize the use of infrastructure. We need to have more homes on smaller land. And contrary to the comments here, the intensification is an environmentally friendly way of developing, because if we are going to increase the size of lots, if we are going to not take advantage of the infrastructure that we are putting in place, well, when the community needs to grow, you're going to have to expand your urban boundary and consume far more land than is absolutely necessary. Intensification is part of the provincial policy statement, because good planning is exactly that. It is through intensification. I hear comments about architectural design, prime waterfront. If we're talking about architectural design, I thank council, I thank staff for having taken the time to look at the developments that we've done, the hundreds of homes that we've done in Muskoka over the past 11 years. And the support that I've heard from council and I've heard from staff was because you were able to corroborate the success of our developments in those communities. I would have hoped that the folks who were pushing against us, and quite frankly, I do believe it's because we're looking to bring attainable ownership homes to this community, to Meaford, and to bring the people who live and work in the broader area and provide services to the waterfront community and the tourism measures. I believe that's what's being pushed against here, unfortunately. And I wish they took a half a day, even two of them, or one of them, and took the time to call the mayor of Bracebridge, the mayor of Gravenhurst, staff at those two municipalities, the chairman of the District of Muskoka, and also taken a drive to the communities and saw how vibrant our communities are. I hear all of what's being spoken about here, and quite frankly, in the GTA, this all works. You can layer on dollars because You know, at the end of the day, there are companies that in the GTA that provide affordable housing, but affordable housing in the GTA can afford all of these additional items that I'm hearing and anticipating. You know, a company like Daniels, their first home program for attainable housing, it's a 651 square foot apartment for $500,000. I can't imagine any or the vast majority of the people who provide the services in Meaford and the broader area could ever be accommodated by spending $500,000 for 651 square feet. It's hard for me to make other comments, but the things that we're talking about here, they add cost, and add cost. And I truly, all I can keep going back to is if proper diligence was made by the community and they really cared, about who Loon was, a drive to Muskoka would have shown them exactly who we are. So it is a little bit upsetting to hear all of this, but again, I know that council and staff have done their due diligence on us. I hope you trust us with the land that we've purchased and the development we've put forward. If it were up to me, I never ever would have. Sorry, it was up to me, but if I didn't feel an incredible amount of pressure that housing was so necessary today, I would have continued with the plan that I proposed because it is good planning, and waited. But every day that goes by, construction costs goes up. So many things are road attainability and affordability that we can't afford to wait. So we're going to proceed, and we are going to continue on with the plan, knowing that almost 20% of it has eroded attainability. Sorry, thank you.
Suresh, thank you for your comments, and thank you to all of our presenters here. Just ask quickly if there's a question around council table for any of our presenters today. Seeing none, again, I will thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for attending and for your comments today, and we will move on. The next item is public questions, and we have one, I think, has come forward with a question for 2 minutes, and I will welcome Marissa to the virtual meeting. Welcome, Marissa. You have the floor.
Hi, good afternoon, Mayor Klumpus, Deputy Mayor Keaveney, and councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and ask my question. My question is in regards to off-leash dogs at a dog beach. I was reviewing the Memorial Park camp info and guidelines on the website, and under the category of beach access, it states that in order to provide as much beach access as possible, the dog beach area will not allow off-leash dogs this year. My two-part question is this: is managing the dog beach at Memorial Park an operational matter? If no, then should the Parks Advisory Committee be involved and make a recommendation to council? And if yes, then as a resident and a local dog owner with a dog that loves swimming, I ask, where else in Meaford can dog owners legally allow their dogs to enjoy a beach off-leash? Our municipality prides itself in being dog-friendly, and as such, it'd be ideal to provide an alternate location close to town if Memorial Park is not available. Thank you again for your time, and I'm open and happy to answer any questions or clarification if needed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I see no hands raised on that. So again, thank you all for, sorry, Councillor Kentner.
Through your worship, could our CAO or Mr. Chapman comment on the question?
Rob, would you care to make a comment on this?
I will have to turn it over to Darcy. I know it was one thing that we considered last year because of COVID and impacts on beaches, but I'll have to turn it over to Darcy because I'm not up to speed on this year. What's going on.
Thank you. Darcy, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, through your worship. because of high water levels and also because of the erosion that happened at Memorial Park, we had to do significant work to put a bunch of rockery along the shoreline all the way down past the pavilion. Because of that, the real beach access now at Memorial Park has probably been cut to about 60% of what it once was. And because of that, we made the operational change to not have off-leash dog area, because if we still maintain the off-leash dog area, then would become very little of any public access to the waterfront, just because of the shoreline work and the high water.
Thank you for that, Darcy. And nothing further. All right. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, again. We will now move on to council inquiries, point 6 on our agenda. Is there anything coming from council? Councillor Kentner.
Thank you, through your worship. The LCBO has reduced its hours in Meaford, closing at 6 p.m. on Fridays. And there's a concern about the impact on tourism, as well as a reduction in service to local customers. It's been suggested on social media that council should be challenging this decision. And I guess my question is there a way that we can respond to this quite sudden decision, which is already in effect, and respond to it on a timely basis? If it has to be through a notice of motion, it's going to probably be a month before we really have a letter to them. So that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other questions coming forward? Councillor Greenfield and then Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, a question for Director Tory and then a comment. In the past, Mr. Chapman has always commented on this, but I think this would be a Director Tory question. The half load limit is not due to be removed until the 1st of May. Now, we have had considerable spring-like weather just the last few days. I'm not guaranteeing it's going to last. I hope it does, but 1st of May is over 5 weeks away. Construction is picking up big time in our area, and that means heavy equipment, heavy loads on our roads. Is there a possibility that our municipality will remove the half load limit perhaps a couple of weeks earlier? And before I ask for an answer on that, I do want to thank the Director of Infrastructure and all the public works people involved for getting the no parking signs on the Miller Street Hill. 2 or 3 weeks ago, I had the privilege of going down the hill, and from halfway down to the bottom, there were 6 vehicles parked on that south side, and that was just not adequate. We really needed those signs. Thank you for putting them in. So now, if we can go back to my question, that would be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie. Over to you, Tori.
Thank you, Councillor Greenfield, and through your worship. So our current half load limits actually are from May 1st, March 1st until May 15th. We do evaluate those throughout the time period. And there is possibility, and in most years, that May 1st deadline is when we take half load limits off, but there is always the ability to extend them as well. So we will continue to evaluate based on weather. I mean, it is looking great now, but you always know that there could be a second winter wind come through. So we will be evaluating those and making sure that they are posted on our website so that people are aware of them. And thank you for the comments with regards to Miller Street Hill. We were lucky to find out that we actually already had no parking through our bylaw along that road, just signs had not been posted. So we were able to make a pretty quick turnaround of being able to post those signs to make sure that there's safe travel on the roadway.
Good news. Thank you, Tori. Matt, did you want to jump in here?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I was going to have a quick comment on Councillor Greenfield's question, and then perhaps I could respond to Councillor Kentner's one as well. To Councillor Greenfield, this is a question that comes up every year, and normally multiple times during the half load limit. So I wonder whether if there is a suggestion from a member of council that our half load limits are the wrong dates, then we should perhaps have a notice of motion so that this council can receive a report about why the half load limits are there, and talk about the cost versus benefit of releasing them early versus the infrastructure cost on our roadways. With regard to Councillor Kentner's comment, it would be very unusual for us to get in touch with a private business to ask them to change their opening hours. Anything is possible should council want to. The only way that we can write a letter on something along those lines is through a council decision. So that would have to be a notice of motion. As always, council has the ability to waive the procedural bylaw to deal with something at the same time as the notice is given. Although in my eyes, that definitely is not advisable, because then the public doesn't know that we're going to be talking about it.
Thank you, Matt. Rob, I see you.
Yeah, actually, I was going to speak very similar to what Matt just said with regard to the LCBO. The other thing is that there's a possible suggestion that the Chamber of Commerce, who advocates on behalf of business, could also write in this regard. And I think it would be, if they are concerned, could do that. I think that wouldn't be a bad thing to be done as well. So I was going to suggest that.
Okay, thank you, Rob. And Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. May I comment on these council inquiries, or?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
With the LCBO, again, I don't think it's our place to tell business when they can or can't open. So having said that, maybe we should push one of the convenience stores to carry all the LCBO stuff, and then there would not be an issue. I think that's a road we should go down on that. And as far as half loads are, concession 6 had a half load limit on it last year. People ignored it. And by the time we stopped them from going whole loads, the road was devastated. And I don't think we should take the half load signs off until it's time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bartley. Is there anything further from Councillor Vickers?
Through your worship, Deputy Mayor Keating has had her hand up for a bit. If you would allow her to go before me, that's fine with me.
I beg your pardon. I missed you, Deputy Mayor. My apologies.
Oh, that's quite all right, Your Worship, and thank you, Councillor Vickers. Just had a couple of questions, if I may. The first one to be for Mr. Armstrong, and I know we've had some discussion on this before, the bollards up on Center Street and the Gates of Kent closure of that second exit. But what I wanted to ask Mr. Armstrong today really is, first of all, if he has any updates, and second of all, what really is council's role in this particular concern?
Yeah, thank you. Through your worship. So council's role is, so we had a request to amend the site plan back quite a few years ago to remove the sidewalk. In expressing concerns, we identified that we would need to look at how our concerns about pedestrians walking on the street would be dealt with in removal of the sidewalk. And through discussions, bollards were suggested and agreed to by the condo board and the developers, a way to allow the sidewalks to be removed. And council facilitated that through a site plan amendment. I understand, obviously, there is some concerns now with those bollards. And there's ongoing discussions about what can be done in lieu of the bollards. I will identify that I am having ongoing discussions with both the developer and the developer's engineer with regard to other alternatives. The position I think the municipality is in is we're always willing to consider other options in lieu of removal of the sidewalk. and can consider those, would bring those to council when, if it's agreed upon. But obviously, at the end of the day, it's going to have to be either the developer or the condo board agreeing to make any further modifications to do that. And until we have that consensus, we wouldn't be able to come back to council.
Thank you for that. And yes, an addendum there, Deputy Mayor?
No, I had an additional question. So if you want to go back to Councillor Vickers, that's fine. And then I had another
All right,
question.
carry on, please. Since I missed you first, you can have cracks at this.
Your worship, thank you. I just wondered if I could ask Mr. Chapman in relation to Marissa Delatalis's question. If we're not going to be able to have off leash at Memorial Park, what would the alternative be?
Through your worship, I think that there is no other alternative for a waterfront area, but we have a lovely dog park just up the road from Memorial Park, which you can take your dog to and unleash them and let them run free within that area.
But nothing for swimming.
Through your worship, no, because there's nothing in the bylaw. There's no other area that has been determined through bylaw to be allowed for an off-leash area.
Matt, I see you.
Darcy's just filled in my comment, which is that, yeah, the bylaw is very prescriptive as to where it can be. Council could ask for the bylaw to be amended to add another waterfront location, but that will, I would imagine that should come with some fairly significant public consultation as well, because we get complaints about off-leash dogs at pretty much every other waterfront spot in the municipality.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Okay, now I'll go to Councillor Vickers, and then I'll come back to you, Deputy.
Thank you, Your Worship. And this question's for Darcy. Before you get away on us, I read your report on the library, the completion of the library, and I thought it was a very thorough and in-depth report with a lot of good information in it. And I just wondered, do you feel there's any opportunity to do this on other projects? So let's say a road upgrade, a major road upgrade, or a bridge, or some other, even the maybe even the Bogner Hall, something of substance, and we could get a report at the end of it saying, this is what we wanted to do, this is what we budgeted to do, this is what we did, and this is what it ended up costing us. And I just wonder if that would help council in ways of understanding the process and the whole process of starting a project, going through the project, and then finishing the project. And if I could just a little bit more add on, what we're doing with the public presentation we had on Gillies Bridge there the other day, information like that, it was very easy to understand. I think it answered a lot of questions that people would have about the bridge. And I'm just kind of wondering if we can't, almost like educate the people and ourselves as councillors, how the process goes about. And it might just help us be able to answer maybe a few more questions of the public. So I just wondered, do you think there'd ever be any possibility of something like this happening?
Through your worship, I guess the easy answer is if this is what council wants to see, then council simply needs to direct staff to do so. And, it just becomes part of our, kind of business operations. I don't disagree. I think it's a good idea, especially with some projects. I mean, in today's package, you're also seeing, the capital project financing for 2020. So that's a listing of all projects, budget versus actual. The reality is, though, is it's a single line item in that report for each of the, 75 or 80 projects that we've got. So certainly doesn't have a whole lot of detail, but to your point, major projects, yeah, I think there's probably good benefit in it, especially those that are multi-year, like the library was, or, water plant upgrades, the sewer plant, various projects like that, where it may actually take us 3 or 4 years from stem to stern to try and actually get it done. Certainly like a final report wouldn't be a bad idea, because then it doesn't get lost through multiple budget cycles.
Okay. And back to you, Deputy Mayor.
Worship, thank you. Just a couple of things. I'm just going to suggest, if Marissa's still with us, to encourage PAC to have discussion about an off-leash waterfront area for dogs, and perhaps bring that back to council. My second question was for Mr. Armstrong again, and just wondering, it's been a little while, Rob, if there's any update at all on our last action engaging Grey County in the Bridges 21 and 22 discussion, if there's any news there at all yet.
Yes, through your worship, we're still waiting for the letter, but I expect that it will be coming at one of the meetings in April. So we should have something very shortly on that from our lawyer.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anything further from council? Okay, seeing none, then we will move on in our agenda to the consent agenda. We have 3 items that we have seen before and that are included in this consent agenda. CAO 2021-05 is to extend the outdoor patio pilot program for 2021. B is a bylaw 2021-25 is a bylaw to adopt the 2021 operating and capital budgets of the Meaford Business Improvement Area. And C is bylaw 2021-26 is a bylaw to enter into an agreement for cash in lieu of parking for 25 Sykes Street. Are there any of those 3 that anyone from council would like to pull? Seeing none, I would ask for a mover and a seconder for this, please, for the consent agenda. Councillor Bell and Councillor Greenfield. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. And moving on to 7.2, our items for consideration. The first one we have is 2021-09 is the Loon call official plan amendment zoning bylaw and the draft plan of subdivision. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the table? Councillor Deputy Mayor and Councillor Kentner. Okay, and Rob, you have the floor on this one.
Yes, thank you, Worship. So quite an extensive report, obviously, for various reasons, and I don't intend to go through it all, but I will run through it and include some of the highlights. So what is before council for consideration at this point in time is an amendment to our official plan. It's very simple. It's to redesignate a portion of the lands that are highway commercial to the urban living area, which is what the majority of the property is currently designated, in addition to the environmental protection. So that's the first thing. That would be an adoption, which goes on to the county for approval. The next thing that council's being asked to consider is a zoning bylaw amendment to implement the draft plan of subdivision that is within the jurisdiction of the municipality to approve. Any approval of that would be conditional upon the official plan amendment being approved by the county. So there's a clause in the draft bylaw with regard to that. And then to comment to the County of Grey and provide a list of draft plan conditions to which we, the municipality, would like to see in the development of the lands for the former Kennedy property. The proposed subdivision plan, which is included in the report, is a reflection of the community engagement. You've heard a bit of the discussion in advance of this. This plan before you for consideration is a reflective of that engagement and changes made there too. In particular, we now have 203 dwelling units proposed, 50 single detached, of which they're large lot singles of 18 meters, so meeting our R1 requirement backing onto Algonquin Drive. And then there's some additional singles facing east in the northerly portion of the site as well. There's 118 towns in the center area of the site. The consideration of that is that they'll be under a flexible zoning, and as they proceed and market conditions exist, if there's the need to fluctuate to the small lot singles, they can, but that's only in the center area of the site. And then 32 semi-detached dwellings along backing onto Highway 26. Originally, the proposal was for townhomes there, but they have been switched to semi-detached with some further openings in the buildings, and also staggered, again, based on community consultation to integrate with that. Another thing that has happened with the change is the integration. You've heard about the green corridor through the center of the site, the pedestrian corridor, and then a public park for probably an active park for Tot Lot in the center of the development. Considering who that they're intending to attract, it makes sense that that include be part of the development. That really highlights the summarization of it, of the development. So as staff, we go through an analysis, and it's sort of highlighted in the report. First, we go to the provincial policy statements, then we work our way down to the County of Grey official plan, Municipality of Meaford zoning bylaw, and then review the zoning bylaw with regard to the different aspects to it. Under section B115 of the official plan, when council and staff consider the development and whether it's appropriate to approve it under a zoning amendment, there's a number of items, talks about respects of character of adjacent residential neighborhoods, easily integrated with surrounding land uses, will not cause or create traffic hazards, unacceptable levels of congestion on surrounding lands. And then there's some other things, can be serviced by full municipal services because it's in our urban settlement area. So those are the things that we need to consider when we consider the development. With regard to the zoning bylaw, there's tools that we can use. We're restricting for the R1 lots, the size of the lot to R1 so that they cannot further be divided without further public consultation, further notice requirements. So they're zoned to recognize that size. We do have to recognize some that don't quite meet the lot frontage, but it's only because of the pie-shaped nature of the lot. By the time you get further back in the lot, they do meet the 18 meters. So we do need to recognize those as exceptions under those. The holding H5 symbol is used to preventing any development on the lands until a number of criteria are met. And for this one, council is very much aware of our potential limitations or limitations with regard to sewage capacity. So one of the conditions to removal of the holding symbol based on a per phase basis is confirmation of allocation of servicing. Because this property will be fronting Highway 26, there will need to be an agreement with the Ministry of Transportation, as well as the developer to the south, Meaford Haven. Their proposed entrances are lined up, and there'll have to be consideration of an agreement with both those developers to dictate the timing of intersection improvements for both those developments and the full payment of those costs by the development community. And then in this case, we have to have a condition for removal of 5 that at any point in time, we cannot remove the holding symbol that brings us below a density of 172 units, because that would put us below the minimum density allowed under the county official plan of 20 units per hectare. So as we go through that flex provisions, we can't go below that. The report speaks to a number of the public comments when it speaks to character and compatibility, traffic and noise, infrastructure, drainage and grading, trees and landscaping, the active transportation and recreation elements. One of the things that we did come forward through the subdivision analysis is that the 14 meters setback along the highway, and the particular desire that that be significantly landscaped to protect the character. It is an entry feature coming into our community, and it's nothing worse than coming into a community. I always think back to the Port Dover community exchange that we did years ago, and coming into that community and you just see a fence as you're entering a community. It's nothing more detracting than that. The fence, I think there's great opportunity with the development of this site where the fence is going to be 14 meters in, and then there's that land that we're recommending be dedicated to the municipality for significant forestation to protect that visual aspect. In addition, the semi-detached units are going to contain some architectural elements. Typically, your architectural elements on the building are at the front. The developers agreed to increase the architectural elements on the back side of those as you see them from Highway 26 as well. And then, as I mentioned, the landscaping and the fencing along there, so that you don't get that visual appearance as you're coming into a community of just seeing a large wooden fence as it enters that community. The emergency access, you do see an emergency access on the, and it was mentioned at the public meeting. Ideally, the developer, the county, all of us would have loved a second access point. The county official plan speaks to the requirement of having a second access point in developments greater than 150 units. In this regard, though, Ministry of Transportation were outside the connecting link, and they have criteria with regard to setbacks of access points. So what MTO has agreed to is allowing an emergency access in this location. So it will function as the servicing corridor. So the water and sewer will come in underneath that emergency access. It will look like a laneway access that in the event something was to happen at the entrance of the development that would block the entrance. In addition, there was an emergency back in the development that it could be used as a backup alternate emergency access. Very unlikely, but you always have to plan for it for those concerns. So that's what would happen there. Detailed design of that would come through the subdivision agreement that would be considered by the municipality. Grading, drainage, and stormwater management. You heard the request with regard to tree preservation. I'm familiar with some developers going in and clear cutting before they have their tree preservation plan, and then you go, well, what's the purpose of doing a tree preservation plan when they cleared out all the trees? You've heard Suresh indicate that it's not their desire. They will not go in and remove trees in advance of the tree preservation plan. The County of Grey will consider that. We've required it as a condition of draft plan approval. Our current bylaw doesn't prohibit it and doesn't actually apply to these lands because we only deal with smaller properties in an environmental protection zone. Actually, one of the things our current bylaw will do, it will apply to the individual lots once they're developed, and those tree preservation areas and the trees that are identified provisionally will be protected by our bylaw, but it doesn't really cover off the tree cutting earlier. Maybe the County of Grey tree cutting bylaw would, but at the end of the day, you've heard the developer say that it's not his intent to do that, and I think I take comfort in hearing him publicly say that. So, the active transportation side, we know that there's going to be a desire for pedestrians to be able to leave this development and head downtown and walk throughout the rest of the community. We realize that it's a bit of a challenge being on Highway 26, but the report does identify that we, through various means, will be looking at ways of getting pedestrian linkages beyond this, whether it's with the upgrade of the water line that comes up Ford Ave to the development, and when that needs to be upgraded, including sidewalks similar to what went out to the plaza out the south end of town. There was a walkway that was installed when that was upgraded down the road. So we will look to opportunities. And then depending on what intersection improvements are dictated by the Ministry of Transportation, if we do end up with lights there, then we could send people south across through the lights and then down into the Meaford Haven and then through the rest of the community. So that will be accounted for in the subdivision agreement. So that pretty much summarizes the report. Before staff are satisfied that it meets the has regard for the provincial policy statement, complies with the County of Grey official plan, complies with our official plan, and represents good planning. And therefore, we're recommending that council adopt the official plan amendment, pass the zoning bylaw, and recommend draft plan approval to the County of Grey.
Thank you, Rob. That's a lot of detailed information in there. It certainly was a well done report, but a lot of consideration to be given here. Questions from council? Councillor Kentner and then Deputy Mayor.
Through your worship, I would just like to say very, very quickly that this whole thing represents three significant elements. It's our first significant housing development and an attainable housing development. It's the first significant engagement with ratepayers in our community who are stepping up and taking a keen interest and being very constructive and collaborative. And also, I want to just congratulate Rob our planning department has moderated this discussion and agreement. And I think that's three big things, and very, very pleased with the way this has unfolded.
Thank you for that, Councillor Kentner. And Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. And following along Councillor Kentner's comments, I also wanted to commend Mr. Armstrong for his great efforts in working with the developer and with the residents who have come together to advocate for good growth. I think this is a really important and significant process. And if I may, Rob, I know you suggested somewhere along the line that, you know, everybody has made concessions here. And I think the result is one that that we can all be proud of and look forward to. Just a couple of questions in relation to the walkability that you were talking about, the pedestrian potential sidewalks. I'm sure you'll be considering the medical center in that and how to get people across and safely to the medical center. And I'll just add in my second question so you can speak to both. With the emergency access and recognizing a really good conversation about Center Street, how were you thinking of marking that? Would it be bollards again or a different approach?
Yes, so the latter question first. Obviously, we'll be looking to further details on that and what makes sense. That one, I'm not sure how we will do it. We might have learned from maybe some other ones. Obviously, Ministry of Transportation is going to have a say as well. They have guidelines, so we'll have to look to that as well. So probably a little more in-depth consideration. I can't speak to what it's going to look like right now. The walkability, obviously we're going to have to direct people to a safe crossing. So having people cross at the emergency access, which is lined up with the medical clinic entrance, I wouldn't be able to support that because there'd be no safe environment or safe crossing there. We'd have to look to have them cross potentially at the intersection if there's lights at Meaford Haven. This is all for now. Who knows if the connecting link gets extended down the road, what happens, other opportunities that we'll continue to explore, but that's just based on the current right now.
Thank you for that, Rob. Councillor Bartley?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And to Rob, I really have two questions. Start with Owen Sound had a development and it was called Butternut Grove Development, and they weren't to touch the trees. And before they put a shovel in the ground for the development, they cut all the Butternut Grove down. And then they said, oops, sorry. It's not the proponent's intention to cut the trees, so he says, but will council see the tree report before cutting can start? That's first question. Second question is, it says on page 64 that there's only 40 sewage units available. So can the proponent only do 40 homes and hopefully something will open up, or how does that work?
So to the first question, Madam Mayor, the butternut, they did an environmental impact study for this, and there is no butternuts on the property. I'm familiar with that butternut issue and doing that. So it's not a concern in this, and I am aware of that happening elsewhere because of the permitting requirement. Just on the Meaford Haven lands to the south, probably don't recall, but we actually had to put holding symbols around butternuts to require that you couldn't develop or do anything. And if you go and remove butternuts, actually it's against the law through the provincial laws to do that. So it's not advisable, but it's not applicable here. So I think we're good there. With regard to the note on service units, it's only going to be, they've noted that I think the original phase 1 was 40 units. They noted that they would like consideration of those 40 units. That will be given at every particular phase on what available units we have to allocate based on our current number. And this goal extends from the report that went to council late last year.
Okay, is secondary? Councillor Bartley?
So yes, please. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I know there's no butternuts there, Rob, but I was just giving you a comparison. And the question is, will council see a tree report before any cutting starts?
Yes, actually, I think through Madam Mayor, the intent is that we'll see a tree preservation plan together with the drainage and grading plan, because that's obviously goes hand in hand and very much important as part of the process as well. So you will get that prior to, and based on the commitment that we heard earlier, that you'll be receiving that in advance of any tree cutting.
Thank you, sir.
Rob, I have a question, and it's about the secondary access route into the property. What will that look like in terms of, and how accessible will it be in terms of you know, a potential emergency, but also as a secondary exit or entrance into the property?
Yeah, and so as I mentioned, the actual details of the emergency and gating and that we won't know until we get to detailed design and consultation with Minister of Transportation. It will be a 6 meter wide hard surface access point, so paved so that it can take the fire trucks should they, or any ambulance, because that's the minimum width for a fire department for an emergency access. It will be able to be used as a pedestrian linkage at some point in time when we do hopefully have sidewalks that can head down to Ford Ave and Grant Ave, right? But that will be looked at through detailed design as we go forward.
Okay. Thank you for that. And Councillor Greenfield.
Thanks, Mayor Klumpus, through you to Mr. Armstrong. First of all, a comment was very interesting, and to me anyway, and I'm sure to everyone in the presentations, the different sides of development. The one that involved tourism, and the other one attainable housing. And I know our council and future councils are going to hear those two terms many times when it comes to future development. I hope agriculture is thrown in there too in the future. Rob, I was asking you this morning about Block E on the property. Now that doesn't have anything to do directly with accommodation or the housing, but I understand Block E, which is the northern part of the property, will be the home of the Stormwater Management Basin and a passive parkland, and that will be assumed by the municipality in the future. Now, I'm assuming that there won't be any trees cut down in that area since we will be the future owners. But can you just explain for the benefit of rest of council and the public what does it mean by the municipality assuming that property? What will be our responsibilities? How soon might that happen? What will we be responsible for that in that area? Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you. Great question, and to you, Madam Mayor. So the municipality has been somewhat fortunate up to today, or up to this period of time, that any of the stormwater management facilities that have been created have been part of a private development or part of a condo development where those condos or private developments, like I think of the Oak Meadows, they've got a facility out front. Gates of Kent have a facility in the northwest corner of their development, stormwater management facilities. Those facilities are now required with pretty much any development for two purposes. One, to control the stormwater from a quantity point of view so that the amount of water leaving the site is no more than leaves the site pre-development. So you're keeping post the same as pre, so it's to hold the water back before it exits into the drainage system. The other is it needs to clean the water. Obviously, when you get urban growth, the water with pavement, water tends to get a little dirty. The stormwater management facility that would be created on site would also from a quality perspective, clean the water. We have not had any of these in a conventional plan of subdivision to date. All our other subdivisions predated these requirements, so they didn't have to be provided. But with any new development, they are required to be provided. Because this is a conventional plan of subdivision, there's no other entity to own and maintain them, such as a condominium corporation. So therefore, it will need to be deeded to the municipality and be maintained by us in perpetuity. As we look to the details going forward, obviously our engineering staff and engineering consultants will be very much involved in that review. We'll be looking at to ensure that the long-term maintenance of these is limited. We're not new to this game. It's been around for many communities. There's a lot of experience out there in the consideration of that, and those details will come back to council as part of the subdivision agreement. That block of land or that facility will have to be built in phase one, because as soon as you start putting houses there, you have to provide that level of treatment, and that facility has taken all of the stormwater management from the entire development in through it before it exits into the system and off the land. So it will be part of phase one.
Thanks for that, Rob. And Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I guess this isn't really a question; it's maybe more of a comment. To not so much my fellow councillors, and definitely not to the planning department, because they're fully aware of it. Is the density part of it? But to a lot of people that live in the municipality and live in the town, they're used to the larger lots with a singular house on it. I don't think that is it's not sustainable to develop subdivisions in that way. The pressure on southwestern Ontario is southern Ontario not to be using up any more agriculture land than needed is a real issue, and I hope people look at it that the more land that we put into housing and take out of agriculture and take it out of food production is really a big negative. To get these density rates up as high as what they are seems extreme until you start realizing that if you don't do that, how many acres of land it actually takes to house this, the same amount of people with a much lower density. And when you think about Meaford, you go to the east, there's some pretty prime agriculture land to the east around, where they grow apples. And if you go to the west, there's definitely some excellent quality land that is used for food production. And, you don't have to go very much further out past the 7th line, and you realize, what kind of production that land can use. So I think people need to start realizing that, you either have to decide to live on large lots and maybe import your food, or we're going to produce our food within Ontario and Canada and live in a much more confined density. And I know it's probably nothing anybody wants to hear, but I think it's reality. And I think Meaford needs to get, to get up to speed with that. To thin out the density any more than what it is, I think is really is a discredit to the agriculture and the food production of Ontario. So I know it's maybe a bitter pill to swallow for people, but I think it is necessary. And even our water and sewer rates, the more meters of pipeline that we have to put out and have fewer and fewer people on it, this is what's causing our water rates and sewer rates to remain high. So I'm hoping anyway, and I guess we'll find out in the next 10 years, by making these projects more intensive, that it will hopefully maybe not bring the prices down or the cost down, but at least start making it that it's a lower increase, if nothing else. So those are just a couple of the comments. I appreciate Mr. Singh, trying to help appease his neighbors, but it isn't always possible. And density is one of those things that is going to be looked at and probably frowned upon by some people, but it is completely and totally necessary. So those are just a few of my comments, and thank you, Your Worship.
Thanks very much, Councillor Vickers. And, okay, Deputy Mayor, I'll allow go ahead,
Thank you,
please.
Worship. Yeah, just an additional question, if I may, from Mr. Armstrong. We heard during the presentations from Diane Hilliard a recommendation to expand the area of notice. And I just wondered, Rob, if I could ask you for your thoughts on implementing that going forward.
Yes, through your worship, there's the way the Planning Act works, it requires you to give X number of meters. I think on the go forward, as part of an update to official plan, that's where you include additional notification requirements. The problem is if you just say, in this one, we're going to do 500 meters, but in this one, we're going to do 120, you can be challenged on not being consistent. I think it's very important to be consistent. So I think the place to do that is contain policies within our official plan. That being said, I think that we know that there's got to be better ways of identifying public meetings through our website in relation to planning applications. We know that the community is getting much more engaged, so we'll be looking to do other forms of notification other than our statutory requirements in advance of that official plan happening.
Thank you for that, Rob. And with that, I want to just say how very, very pleased and proud we are of the work that you have done and your team with the developers on this project. As was said earlier on by Councillor Kentner, this was our first real go at some major big development project, and following with our priority of an attainable housing development, and moving ahead with what we as council has determined as a priority from a development perspective going forward. So I wanted to thank you for that, for the work that you've done, for the consultation that you've provided on both sides. And I know how much the developers themselves were so pleased with the relationship and with the compatibility, I guess, and working together on finding solutions to the issues that have been presented, not only by potential neighbors, but also in just meeting the priorities and the development that we wanted to see in our community. So thank you for that. Thank you to all of the presenters who have raised their concerns and have been thought about and considered going forward. If there's nothing further from council on this particular issue, then I will call the question. All in favor of supporting this draft plan approval to the County of Grey, subject to the conditions contained in the report? And that is carried. Thanks very much. Let's move on to Bylaw 2021-27, the Loon Call Official Plan Amendment. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please, to put this on the table? Councillor Kentner, Councillor Bartley. Rob, anything further at this time?
No, this one and the next one are just implementing we spoke about approvals to implement. Yes.
Okay. So any further questions from council at this stage? Seeing none, I will call a question. All in favor of this report coming forward and this bylaw being adopted? That is carried. And the next one is Bylaw 2021, the Loon Call Zoning Amendment. Again, a mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the table. Councillor Bartley and Councillor Vickers. And unless there's any question from council or comment on this amendment, seeing none, I will call a question. All in favor? And that is carried. Okay, moving on to DEV 2021-14 is a zoning amendment for Eliza Street, and Bylaw 2021-29 regarding the zoning amendment for Eliza Street. A mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the table. Deputy Mayor and Councillor Greenfield. Thank you. Over to you, Rob.
Thank you, Worship. So this is a public meeting that we held not too long ago on Eliza Street. It was a request to reduce the environmental protection zone on the property in recognition of establishing a building envelope on it that's of reasonable size. The Conservation Authority has agreed to the reduced EP, that's who the municipality relies on in identifying EP boundaries. It's noted that they will have to include floodproofing within the building in building it. However, it is out of the EP zone in doing so. So we're in a position to now recommend approval of the bylaw amendment going forward.
Thanks for that. Anything from council? Question, comments? Councillor Vickers.
Through your worship, Rob, I'm a little bit puzzled that that the Grey Sauble maybe changed their setback. Like, usually we're talking about, we've done this before in the past years about, building housing and other developments too close to our waterways. And I'm just puzzled that why all of a sudden this one is getting changed. And is this setting a precedent for any future, water setbacks from our streams or wetlands?
And through the worship, so there's two different reasons for setbacks at the watercourse. One is the natural heritage elements, so it's protection of the actual watercourse from a fisheries point of view, which we know this watercourse, it runs through a lot of properties, and so really doesn't apply in that instance. The other is the natural hazard, which is the floodplain issue. In this particular one, they did a floodplain study to identify, so typically you get your setback and it's very general in nature without study. You can do a study on an individual property and identify with more detailed surveys and everything like that, where is the appropriate setback? And that's what the applicant did in this situation, where they prepared a more detailed floodplain study prepared by a qualified consultant the Conservation Authority accepted. So no, it's not establishing a general precedent that everybody can reduce it. Someone else can possibly look at hiring a consultant, looking at those details on their individual property. You know what, sometimes you'll do that study and then it might mean the hazard area is bigger if the floodplain elevations aren't appropriate. So that's the difference in the two. In this situation, they did the detailed study and it was acceptable to the Conservation Authority. So we as staff, again, relying on their expertise, would just be putting it forward to implement their recommendation.
And if I can follow up, like I said, it just seems concerning that all of a sudden, just because you can get a consultant to say something in these plans, that whether it's right or not, it just seems like if you've got maybe the right consultant to say what you want, you almost seem to be able to get it through. So I'm concerned that all of a sudden we're changing the rules halfway through about a building envelope that seems like it should have been cut and dry. That here are the rules, you obey by the rules, and I realize there probably is many other houses that have been built incorrectly on these floodplains, and people look at you and say, well, why did this happen? Well, it happened because of poor planning. And I just hope we aren't going down that same road once again, that people won't look back at this in 10 or 12 years, or 10 or 20 years, and say, well, how did this one ever make it through? And it'll go back to that poor planning thing again. So like I said, I struggle on this one, because obviously the creek's right there, and just because other houses are built closer to it doesn't mean that we should continually allow more houses being built that close. And I realize it's out of your control, Rob. That is the Grey Saubles. But I still think we should question this one. Thank you.
Rob?
Yeah, just in this particular instance, it's a very technical exercise based on very detailed survey information. So I think sometimes a consultant can engineer something, but this was very detailed, and so it's a little different than that. So I take comfort in knowing that they've gone through the necessary process in satisfying the Conservation Authority with regard to that reduction. The problem with this lot is because of the EP, it's an existing lot of record, so it is a separate lot, but it was unbuildable because of the EP. So again, that's another one. If ideally, if someone has a lot with EP that has area outside the lot, you'd be able to build anyways. So there's those two factors at play for this lot that did come into effect. So just in responding to the query.
Thanks for that, Deputy or Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. I originally had some concerns about this project. I have talked to the good folks over at Grace Hobble and seem to think that it does fall within the permitted parameters. It's a relatively small building envelope that will have to be utilized, but I was just thinking, here's another case where tree cutting or lack of tree cutting could be very, very important on this lot. Hopefully, as many trees as possible are left standing close to this creek, because it can be very volatile, and it's likely didn't run too much water this year, but it could happen. It's happened before, and I hope we're making the right decision. I hope Grace Hobble is making the right decision. I'll have to put my faith in the experts, and I will vote in favor of this going ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greenfield. Anything further from council? Then I will call a question. All in favor of this amendment, this bylaw and zoning amendment, and that is carried. The next one is DV 2021-17, a heritage permit for 16 Berry Street. I have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Bell and Councillor Kentner. And Rob again.
Yep, thank you, Worship. So this was a heritage permit that went through the Heritage Committee, which recommended approval of it. It's the building right next door to our back parking lot at the admin building. Proposed to create a bike shop where the old Hills Dairy used to be located, and has really remained empty for quite some time. The building is not designated a heritage building under our heritage plan. So really the key elements to be considered with this approval is to ensure that any change does not detract from the heritage character, the Heritage Conservation District character, and the committee in reviewing it is recommending approval, and staff support that. So
Great. Good to know there might be a bike shop back in town. Anything further from council? Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you again, Your Worship. Thanks, Mr. Armstrong. Yeah, I'm really pleased to see a bike shop come back. When it comes to recreation, bicycling is right up there with all the other activities. I did mention briefly at the Heritage meeting that I was a bit concerned. Berry Street there is quite narrow. Certainly on the south side, there's nothing but river, and it is close to the Sykes Street intersection. I'm worried a bit about traffic, about parking. Quite likely just very temporary parking, but do we have the necessary policies in place just in case parking problems do occur there, that we can address them? Thank you.
Over to you, Rob.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. And yeah, this did come up, and it's really outside the scope of the actual heritage permit. But it is something that will be coming forward to council, and Tori may speak to it a little better than I can, but it is, that street is a consideration under the transportation master plan. It is a street that we need to look at as it intersects with Sykes Street on the go forward. So we'll be reviewing that in relation to the transportation master plan.
Anything, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. And first of all, I just want to say how exciting it is that we're attracting a number of new businesses to our downtown. That's really great news. Just in relation to the signage, and I see the size here on the drawing, but just thinking of where the building is and wondering if it is going to be visible coming across the bridge, and whether, I know this probably isn't part of the heritage permit either, whether there will be discussion about a finger sign or a sandwich board or anything of that nature to help people be aware of the business being there. So I guess that'll come up at a later time.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, to Your Worship, one of the nice things that that we like to promote is, although it's not a sign, it is a bite that's projecting, going to project out. And we like those projecting signs. It so helps augment the Heritage Conservation District. And we have a few of them and love to get more of them in the downtown. That would be great.
Yeah. And a perpendicular sign. Good.
Yes.
Anything further from council? Then I will call a question. All in favor of approving this heritage permit? And that is carried. And then another heritage permit for 141 Sykes Street North, DEV 2021-18. Mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Greenfield, Councillor Kentner. And back to you, Rob, please.
Yep, thank you, Worship. So this is the heritage permit for the house on the southeast corner of Sykes Street and Parker Street. As council recall, it garnered some interest last fall with regard to the brick that had been removed. Quite exciting that the proponent is taking significant steps to revitalize this building, which is of particular interest to a lot of people in the community. The heritage permit that was applied for includes a number of other things that will be considered further with further details by the committee at a later date. But the one thing that the committee did take a position on and recommend is that the permission to replace the roofing materials on the building and the turret could proceed. And it was based on some similar materials that were placed at 162 Trowbridge Street West. So we're in a position to recommend that this one be approved as well.
And very nice to see the extensive plans for reconstruction on that building, that's for sure. Any comments for or questions for Rob? Then I'll call the question. All in favor of this, approving this, and that is carried. INF 2021-03 is the County of Grey Street Sweeping Agreement. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Kentner, Councillor Vickers, thank you. And Tori, over to you.
Thanks, Your Worship. So the municipality has had a street sweeping agreement with the county for a number of years. That includes the municipality completing street sweeping on county roads within the urban area when we are completing our own street sweeping program. The update to this agreement is based on comments received from the county earlier this year, that the municipality will be charging for this service. This was previously included in the previous agreements, however, was not actually followed. So we will be using our fees and charges bylaw rate to charge the county for the street sweeping that we complete for them. But otherwise, this is the same agreement that we've been working with in the past. So if you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you, Tori. Any questions? Fairly straightforward. Thanks for that.
Thank
I
you.
will call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. Moving on to INF 2021-04 is the electronic waste contract. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Bell and Deputy Mayor. And still with you there, Tori.
Thanks, Your Worship. So the municipality and municipal partners have provided residents with the electronic waste disposal since 2011. Over the past 4 years, the Meaford Fire Department has run the program. In late 2020, it was identified through Green Tech, the electronic waste recycling company that we currently work with, that there was a new contract and that additional requirements would be included with that contract that would require additional staffing to run the program. Because of these changes, the fire department identified that they would be no longer able to continue to run the program, as they would be required to pay staff for the additional hours, meaning that the program would not, the program would run at a loss to the fire department. And they currently use the funds towards the training program. So based on this information, the Environmental Service Department reviewed the available alternatives to ensure that electronic waste disposal is still provided to our residents. And so the alternatives we looked at were the municipality continue to run the program, to have a partnership with a local volunteer group to run the program, and to partner with a local electronic waste disposal company to provide the service to residents. So based on our review of the options, it was staff identified that the preferred option is to partner with Storage Meaford, a local electronic waste disposal company. This company currently provides similar services in Simcoe County and is a provider through the Electronic Products Recycling Association, which is an industry-led non-for-profit organization that regulates recycling across Canada. So this alternative will increase service to residents by providing drop-off Monday to Saturday from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. And we'll continue to work with Storage Meaford to provide communication and updates to residents. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Tori. Another straightforward. Good agreement. Councillor Vickers and then Councillor Greenfield.
Just a quick question, Your Worship, and to Tori is, if we do pass this, when will the program start? Potentially, when could?
As soon as possible. We have put our current program on hold because we do need to sign a new agreement with Green Tech if we were to continue it. And because we're not looking at doing that, we have had it on hold for the past 2 months. So we are hoping to get this up and running as soon as possible. And Storage Meaford is also excited to get started with the program. So that's our hope.
Yeah, and that's good because to be quite honest with you, my better half has asked me more than once or twice this spring already, where can I take my electronic waste? So I think this is a good thing. And I'm looking forward to being able to give my wife, Karen, answer. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. I apologize for having to ask this question, but through you to Director Tory, is this the former waste transfer site, the former transfer station that Mr. Bell has some familiarity with?
So yes, it is my understanding that the owners of Storage Meaford, the property is the same as the past transfer station.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Anything further for Tori on this one? Then I will call the question. All in favor of this agreement to provide electronic waste disposal? And that is carried as well. And at this point, we're just about to go into committee of the whole. I would suggest that we take a break. And if we could return by 3:05, is that enough time for everyone? Do you want 10 minutes? 5 minutes? Okay. 3:05. Please turn off your cameras and your sound. Welcome back, everyone. We will reconvene this meeting with a mover and a seconder, please, to go into committee of the whole. Councillor Bell and Councillor Bartley, all in favor? And that is carried. The first item on this point 8 of our agenda is corporate services. COR 2021-11 is the annual development charges treasurer's report. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the table? Deputy Mayor and Councillor Bartley, thank you. And this is a story from our treasurer. Mr. Chapman, over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. One of these annual reports that kind of required to do for council, but also through the Development Charges Act. So we received about just over $506,000 in development charges in 2020, which is very much in line with what we actually received the prior year as well. The back end of the report and the appendices shows what we actually financed. In reality, pretty small year for funding. We had some debt repayment for the water treatment at just over $29,000. We funded a couple small studies for $32,000. The big kind of ticket this year that actually demands a bit of explaining is the fire services. We certainly didn't purchase a fire truck in 2020. However, as we were going through the update to the development charges background study, there was a recognition that back in 2007, we purchased a fire truck that was supposed to be funded from development charges, and it was debt financed over 10 years. And that debt financing was paid for through the fire reserve fund annually instead of the development charges reserve fund annually. So ultimately, the DCs owed the taxpayer this $205,000. So we're trying to correct a wrong from a decade or so ago and make sure that the DC funds are correct and up to date when we get through this this update over the next 8 to 10 months. So that's really the one major item from 2020.
Thanks, Darcy. Any questions on that? Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Darcy, so I'm glad you explained the fire truck when I had several questions about it. But what that does is puts it into a credit balance in the DC charges for fire protection. Is that allowed?
Through your worship, it is. So long as we're allowed to have kind of our reserve fund balances for each separate fund in a negative amount, so long as the totality of all the development charges isn't in a negative. So it like realistically, one reserve fund is borrowing money from another reserve fund, and as long as they're borrowing from each other within the overall DC pot, then it's still fine, and we're compliant to the legislation.
So truthfully, the fire department reserve fund will be better, the DC fund will be less, and we will contribute to the DC fire fund this year to bring it up to a zero?
Through your worship, no. So we'll collect development charges over the years that get spread out to all the different service areas. So you'll notice on the schedules to the report, it actually says how much we captured in 2020. In total, out of that $506,000, there was a portion of it that went to fire services. So if we collected the same amount of money in 2021, generally speaking, it would be the same that would get allocated. And over time, that negative balance will be worked off by annual collections.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Darcy? Seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor of receiving this report? And that is carried. And COR 2021-12 is the capital project financing. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, for that? Councillor Bartley and Deputy Mayor, thank you. And still with you, Darcy, on this one?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So this is just one of the annual reports that we provide to council to make sure that you're aware of where we're at once we've gotten to year end. So in 2020, we had budgeted just slightly over $14.8 million in total capital projects. At the end of the year, we have spent just over $12.3 million, or right around 83%, which for a year when we were dealing with COVID and we had to shelve some projects just because of supplier issues or timing issues, was actually I think a pretty good year for us. The appendix to the report shows each of the capital projects that we had budgeted and then the expenses against those. It also includes projects that were unbudgeted. For all those unbudgeted projects, either we have resolutions already from council that came throughout the year giving us approval to do so, or in many cases, there were also carryover projects from last year where there was still money that just needed to be spent to finish the project off, or we might have ordered a piece of equipment that didn't get delivered until January or February or something like that. So a further report will be coming on April 12th with regards to all the non-budgeted transfers to and from reserve funds. And at that time, we'll be seeking formal approval from council to actually fund those non-budgeted projects through the reserve funds.
Okay, thank you for that. Darcy, anything for him? Questions, comments, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Worship, and to Mr. Chapman. And as you know, Darcy, this has always been a big interest of mine, how we actually get things done. So my question in relation to this particular report has to do with a comment suggesting that project management functions require more staff time. And we have our two project managers. So can you clarify for me their roles in relation to the suggestion that more staff time is required to really complete and take on more projects?
Your Worship, well, so we don't actually have project managers. We have two project coordinators. So, I would say 99% of the, well, maybe not 99, probably 90% of the projects that you see on this list are actually managed by department managers or the senior management team. There are a few projects that might be managed by departmental coordinators, or with IT related stuff, maybe Richard in particular might manage one or two projects, but for the lion's share, all of our capital projects run through the management team. So there are 17 managers and senior managers in total, and between all of us, we are the ones who actually manage all these projects. The two coordinators really are just there to help with the large scale projects to make sure that nothing goes off the rails, that the paperwork is done properly, that we're meeting all of the needs of the external consultants and then the contractors when they're on site. And they're also making sure that all of the work is being done pre-project when it comes to budgeting and doing all that analysis to make sure that we've got all of our estimates in line with where they should be. So when I talk about project management, certainly when I say 17 people, for 80 or 90 projects, it would seem that shouldn't be too difficult. The issue is that, as I mentioned, all of these, or the vast majority of these projects are managed by people who actually have to manage people in divisions and departments, or the corporation as a whole, which would be the case, if it's a project that's being led by Rob. So, we oftentimes struggle to have enough time to do all the daily management that's required, and we're all working managers as well. Most of us, might only spend half of our time actually doing management functions. The rest of the time we're actually doing day-to-day work and day-to-day functions. So I think that's why this was put in that report, just to highlight to council that there's only so much that can be done in a year, and there's only so many hours, and we will continue to struggle to make sure that capital projects are done, because you can't not do the day-to-day management. You can't not do that human resources stuff that's required of you as a manager. So where the push always comes to shove is with capital projects.
Okay. You're all right with that, Deputy Mayor? All right.
Yes, leaves me a lot to think about, but yes, thank you.
Anything further for Darcy at this stage? Then I will call the question. All in favor of receiving this report for information? And that is carried as well. And the next one is COR 2021-13, the library facility update, a report that we've been waiting for and was such a terrific read. Darcy, thank you very much for that. It is remarkable to think that that this project came through as well as it did over the many years that we've been thinking about this. So I will ask for a mover and a seconder, please, to put this on the table. Councillor Greenfield, Councillor Kentner. And for you, over to you, Darcy. Do you want to make any final comments on this wonderful project?
Well, thank you, Worship. I guess first I'd actually like to thank Councillor Vickers, because the report that I was going to provide to Council was simply just an outline of where we're at with final dollars and to seek approval to go out and get financing. And it was Councillor Vickers who actually asked if it was possible to do some kind of a post-project wrap-up to, provide a history and kind of a step-by-step as to where we've gone. So I tried to put something together that kind of met those criteria, and I hope it hit most of the marks going forward. So, yeah, I mean, we've done very well overall. I mean, we got lucky with some grants. Selling the facility at 390 Sykes for more than what we originally expected certainly helped by a couple $100,000. The fundraising effort was phenomenal. I mean, when they first said $500,000, I thought that was even a fairly lofty goal. And every community has its own needs and its own challenges. So this certainly isn't to slight anybody else, but we know that Clearview also recently has built a library. They went through a fundraising effort, and I believe they are somewhere around $150,000 in total fundraising. So for a community like Meaford to come through with near $900,000 is just astronomical, and certainly that really is the difference maker in having to borrow $2 million versus having to borrow $3 million in this project. So kudos to everybody who opened up their checkbooks and donated to this project. There's also, a bit of a silver lining in this, that even though we're going to have to go out and borrow just over $2 million, a portion of that financing is going to be short-term financing, because council has already provided approval for the municipality to divest itself of the existing library facility and to use it to fund part of this project. So when I go out and get the final loan paperwork done, there's going to be two components to that loan. One will be the long-term portion of it, and one will be a smaller amount for short-term financing. And the expectation will be is that once we, it's almost like construction financing. So once we sell the building, then we'll immediately be able to pay that off as well. So the total long-term debt will actually be less than that $2,050,000 once we get through selling the building.
Anything further? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Chapman. And yes, incredible news on the fundraising. Congratulations to this entire community and all the folks that made that happen. Two questions, if I may. Do you have any idea off the top of your head of the value of the old library? And I'll give you my second question as well. If you could delve a little bit deeper into the DC piece, is it similar to what you just explained in relation to the fire apparatus, where the negative balance will be offset by your annual collections? So just, can you explain that just a little bit more?
Sure. So, through your worship, on the facility side of things, I'm not too sure if we've got an actual appraisal yet for that building, which would be required before we could actually sell the facility. So I couldn't give you a dollar value at this stage of the game until we actually get through the appraisal process, because we know, if we're divesting, we wouldn't sell it for less than what it's been appraised at. So that'll be done, in short order. Certainly, I'd like to make sure that everything with this project is buttoned up and finalized before the end of this calendar year. With regards to the DC financing, I had no problem making the adjustment within the fire services side of things, even though there was going to be a negative balance, because I recognized that within 2 or 3 years of collecting DCs, that negative balance was going to disappear. So it's very short-term in nature, and there was more than enough money in the overall DC fund to cover that off. With regards to the library financing, this will be a true loan. It will be attributed directly to the library development charge. And the reason for that is that it is like a 15-year term. So it's very long-term in nature. So we'll borrow the money. It does go against debt carrying capacity, but it doesn't have to be paid for by the taxpayer. It'll be paid for annually from the development charge reserve fund for the library services. So it's separate in nature from a funding perspective, although it does affect our long-term debt carrying capacity.
Okay. Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And Darcy, just back on to what you just said about the DC charges. So the further $1 million and $1,075,000, that's in the total before of what we paid for the total library. That's not in addition to what we took out of development charges, correct?
Through your worship, it's part of the overall financing of that $7.1 million project. This isn't on top of it.
It's not on top.
No, so the project was, the intention was that about $1.3 million of the project was going to be funded from development charges.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that we just didn't have that $1.3 million in the bank already collected in the DC funds. So we've already used a couple $100,000 that we did have in the bank. Now we're going to have to go out and borrow the rest of it long term.
Thank you, sir.
And Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and to Mr. Chapman and to those listening. First of all, I do want to give another real big thank you to the fundraising committee. It knocked me over when it was first started. They put a goal of about $500,000, and I thought I knew the heart of the town of Meaford, but I was very wrong. I was personally assuming maybe it would be really nice if they could collect $250,000, but they have certainly outdone themselves, and it has helped this project unbelievably well. To the point of what we've been talking about with the DC charges and the long-term debt, I think with a question that fellow Councillor Vickers said very early in today's meeting, I kept all the paperwork, as you know, Mr. Chapman, as this has been going along, because I think I might have been the councillor who was fairly consistent about asking for percentages of completedness and how far we are along in our money. And when it was promoted, and I kept the paperwork from July and August of 2019, it said expenses, and then down it said revenues, and it clearly says development charges of $968,300. So in that case right there, I think maybe for a little clarity, that probably should have had a bracket beside it, that there was a good possibility that we would need to do the very financing that you've talked about today, since quite literally we did not have that money in our bank. Now, is that statement of mine about not having the money in the bank actually truth, and that now we are looking at doing it in the manner in which you have suggested? Just a little more clarity on that, please.
Through your worship, I'm positive that and maybe it's not clearly in the report, but I know that I have verbalized that a number of times, that it was going to have to be debt. I know every year for the last 3 years, within the long-term debt report that I provide annually, there was always a future forward look, and in that long-term debt report, it's always listed the library and the development charges component of the library needing debt as well. So certainly can always do better on communicating it and making it even more clear. But it has been noted on a number of occasions, maybe just not succinctly enough.
Councillor Vickers is next. Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Darcy, can you give us an idea how many years it will take for the DC charges to pay down that $1 million+ dollars? Is it a very long-term thing, or?
Through Your Worship, we'll finance it over the same 15-year mark as the remainder of the debt that will be funded from the taxpayer. And it will take at least that 15 years.
So everything that's collected through the DC charges will be applied against the loan. Would that be correct? Or am I confused?
That's correct. That is correct. Through Your Worship, that this is the only project within the library component of the DCs. So we've now finished that project. So the only thing that remains is for that debt to be paid off long-term from the collection of development charges. There are no other projects that need to be funded from that specific fund.
So just a quick follow-up. So after the 15 years, will we start a new DC library fund?
Through Your Worship, I think we get through 15 years. At some point in time over that'll give us 3 additional cycles of development charge background study updates. Depending on how the community grows, I have no idea what would be required for additional services. I mean, there could be a second branch that could be required, out in Bogner, maybe by chance or something. 15 years from now, who knows? That's a long time away, but it'll be at least 15 years to fund the outstanding debt related to this project.
So just one more question, Your Worship, I promise.
One more, Mr. Councillor Vickers.
So back 5 or 6 years ago, did we foresee that a new library was going to be required? So then we added an additional DC charge. Is that what I'm getting from this whole process? This is before my time.
Yes, through Your Worship, Meaford has had development charges, I believe, since 2004. And since 2004, library services have been part of that. And the requirement or the expectation within the DC calculation since 2004 has been an expanded library facility. So we've always been planning for that.
Thank you.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and sorry to beat on a dead horse, Darcy. So this loan for the DC, for the library, did we get that loan from a bank or is it borrowed from another DC charge?
Through Your Worship, it'll come from Infrastructure Ontario, just like the tax supported component of the debt. It's just that most likely we'll break that into 2 separate loan instruments. It's just to easily track it as one being paid for by the taxpayer, the other portion being paid for by development charges.
And Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Chapman. A couple of things. First of all, I have congratulated the fundraising team before, and I'll do it again. I'll continue to do it. The fundraising goes on. There still are donations accepted. We have reached almost $900,000 in donations. I found it quite exciting at the library board. Just about every month we got an update on the fundraising total, and we just basically got over the amount from the last board's meeting, and then we had a new one, and it was always substantially higher. And the committee did just an amazing job. It's been an expensive endeavor. I'm not going to deny that. It's been more expensive than what I was hoping it would be originally. But I've had the opportunity to visit the new library likely 6 or 7 times since it did get open. It's a wonderful facility, wonderful employees there. This is a really good example of what development charges will do for a municipality. We don't have very many ways of raising revenue. Development charges are very important to our to our bank accounts, for sure. But I am personally just so pleased with the outcome, and I want to take just a minute today to thank former Councillor Mike Petker. Mike played such an important role in pushing this project through, and he should be thanked for that. He should be remembered for that. He was a driving force. I appreciate it. I think everyone who values the facility that we have must appreciate the work that Mike did to help push this forward. Okay, thanks, sir. Thank you.
Said. Councillor Kentner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would also like to thank Mr. Chapman. I don't know how many times I saw him in the middle of things over there over the months and months of construction, and I'm sure he was there to make sure that everything was done according to Hoyle. And thank you for the report, which is very comprehensive. And I was the guy that kept asking you when this report was coming, because ratepayers were asking me. And I just want to make one point, not a criticism, but I have had two members of the fundraising committee ask me about where we got the $500,000 as the community fundraising budget, because I know that was probably the case early on, but for most of the campaign, $750,000 was the target. And I know it was still a long way away when the committee accepted that challenge. And but there's a little fear that people will think they've gone over the $1 million mark because they exceeded their goal by 380,000. So I just, as I say, that's a concern of the fundraising committee that's been brought to me. So I just mention it. Thank you.
Sure, Your Worship. I guess I can explain that. So the budget total actually comes from late 2017 July 2018, when council actually approved the award of the contract for the construction. So, and at that time, we knew that the total was $7.1 million. We hadn't even struck a fundraising committee at that stage of the game. But council had already kind of, laid down the sword saying, we're going to move forward with this, and we expect somebody to take the charge on fundraising. And the hope would be that the committee can come up with $500,000 if we are going to invest this much in this project. So that's where the $500,000 came from. It was actually embedded in the original budget at the time of construction award. And then since then, the committee met together. We actually formed the committee properly through terms of reference. They came up with a $750,000 goal, and we went from there. But the final chart in page 6 of 9 of the report tries to reflect the fact that when council made the decision post buying the food land and then entering into that construction contract, that the expectation was that we were going to have to borrow just over $3 million. The reality is that we're now borrowing $2 million, supported by the taxpayer.
Well, again, thank you very much for that very comprehensive report. And it's really a good document to have a historical record of these major big projects that mean so much to the community, Darcy. So thank you for that. Rob,
Yeah.
I see your finger.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. So one of the things I wanted to highlight in the previous report, Darcy spoke about project managers. Well, I think we absolutely need to recognize Darcy's really, really hard work on this project as project manager. I know that he really kept the consultants feet to the fire in holding the line on the cost and making those decisions, and he did a miraculous job doing that, and I think we need to thank him I know from a staff perspective and keeping us up to date, we really appreciate it. And just also want to recognize the work that he did on this project for sure as well.
Well said. Thank you for that. Well done. With that, I will call the question. All in favor of finalizing this long-term debt? And that is carried. Thanks again, Darcy. Well done. COR 2021-14 is the award of tender for the Sykes Street North reconstruction. I have a mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the table. Councillor Bartley and Councillor Vickers. And you want to bring us up to speed on that one, Darcy?
Yeah, thank you, through your worship. So this is more of a Tory report than me, but because it's the purchasing side of things, I'll take the first stab at this because of course it's over that $150,000. The project is over budget, but the saving grace is that the majority of the budget overages are actually within the attributable to the road and the storm sewer components of the project, which are being funded 90% by the Connecting Link grant. So, even though we're a couple $100,000 over budget, the reality is that we only need to transfer $52,000 from the water reserve and $15,000 and change from the sewer reserve to cover off the increased costs for those areas. The remainder of the costs will be funded within the project budget and through the Connecting Links grant. As far as the actual technical side of the project and the contractor and the potential road closure and all that kind of stuff, I'll be done my part. And if you have questions in that regard, please make sure to ask Tori.
Okay, thank you, Darcy. Are there any questions going forward? Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And so Darcy, the Connecting Links grant wasn't a fixed number. It was a number after we get the contract back?
Through your worship, actually, it is a fixed number, but that the total amount, even though that we're over budget from the 2021 budget, which was an updated estimate from the consultant, that increase still fits within our Connecting Link funding overall, because we had the original Connecting Links grant application was for a project expectation of just over $2.8 million. And then from there, from that grant application, we went out, got the consultant. The consultant went back, did some basic design and refined the numbers and provided those to Tori and her team for the 2021 budget. And the cost was brought down to $2.2 million. The reality is that the tender came in slightly more than that. So that's why we still have that flexibility within the overall Connecting Links funding.
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions for Darcy or Tori coming up with the approving the award of tender? Getting off easy. Okay, with that, I will call the question. All in favor of this report is received. And that is carried. COR 2021-15 again is an award of tender for a supply and delivery of the tandem snowplows. I have a mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the table. Councillor Bartley, Councillor Greenfield. And back to you, Darcy.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, again, another purchasing report, but there is a bit of a wrinkle in this one, of course. The standard lead time for a snowplow truck fully kitted out is between 10 and 12 months. And because of that, we knew that we were going to have to replace, the fleet schedule had the replacement of two tandems in 2022. So the Fleet Services Group went out to tender, received pricing back. It effectively fits within the $600,000 budget. Now, I say that because that was just an estimate within the 2022 projection, because, of course, council only approves a budget 1 year at a time. So the wrinkle from this report is not that we're over budget, it's that we effectively don't even have a budget yet. And that's why we're here at council right now, seeking pre-budget approval to effectively allocate that $600,000 in funding towards the purchase of these 2 trucks so that we can get the purchase order put in, so we can get the trucks hopefully sometime between January and March of next year. That's kind of they're expecting timing of January, but like everything else, we are seeing some bottlenecking within supply chains because of COVID.
Thank you for that, Darcy. Any questions or comments? Deputy Mayor?
Your worship, thank you. And I don't know about anybody else, but I'm really struggling with this one. We have no idea at this point what our stressors are going to be in the 2022 budget. Don't have any idea what increase is going to be proposed. And this is a huge amount of money. And I recognize that it's part of the fleet program, but I just having real difficulty supporting this at this time when we just have no knowledge of what that budget's going to look like.
Through your worship, I understand the hesitance here. That I think council does need to recognize, though, that we do have a fleet replacement policy that for heavy duty vehicles like this, they're supposed to be replaced at 12 years. By the time we get the new fleet in place, the fleet that we'll be replacing is actually 16 and 14 years of age. And I understand that there, our budget pressures annually. I also know that we're asking council to make a decision effectively a year in advance. But the recognition is that if one of these vehicles goes down to the point where like it could easily cost, $40,000, $50,000, for a major overhaul, because if they go down, then we still have to have these vehicles unless we're willing to reduce the number of plow routes and then therefore change the service level for winter control. And it's 2 vehicles that are well past their prime.
Thank you, Darcy.
We've already been pushing them off. That's the problem. And now we're kind of at a pinch point.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And this is to probably Tori or Darcy. We have 2 mechanics and they're going to be working on heavy equipment only. Having said that, our heavy equipment should be in tip-top shape. Is it possible that we can take the 12-year renewal rate to 15 years, which these 2 would fall under? I understand that. I'm just thinking that the way we're going to keep these things in tip-top shape, we should move it to 15 years so we're not jumping the gun in future years. And having said that, is it a really silly idea to keep one around as a spare in case another truck blows up?
So I'm happy to jump in on this one. I think we would need to do an evaluation. I don't think we can just sit here and say we have mechanics and so we can change things. We need to do an internal evaluation and see how our fleet is over the lifespan of it. I know right now, a lot of our vehicles are having a difficult time getting to the end of the replacement time period because they, are being utilized often and ongoing. And so they do see wear and tear. And so it sometimes depends on the vehicle, but as we've only had internal mechanics for a year now, we don't really have enough data to be able to identify a change in that program, but it could be something looked at in the future. As Darcy did identify, these plow trucks, are at the end of life. We can always keep one, but we do receive money back when we do sell these vehicles that we then utilize to help reduce costs on future purchases. So if we did keep one, we wouldn't see that revenue back. So it would have a financial impact on the program.
Through your worship, just to follow up on that if I can as well, I think it's a good point about extending the life. I think you know, where we want to do that is actually kind of draw a line on purchases going forward. So most of these heavy vehicles have, you know, pretty good warranties and pretty good service expectations from the manufacturer for about the first 24 months. And then we've also had our mechanics for last year. So realistically, you know, we could say I think so long as we keep mechanics, you know, long term, I think, you know, it's pretty easy to say that any heavy equipment that's been purchased within the last 36 months should move to a longer life cycle replacement. But the problem is that you're saying that vehicles that are 14 and 16 years old that have only seen good service for the last year are going to actually be able to maintain for an extended period of time. And I think that's the real issue, right? But moving forward with newer vehicles, absolutely. As long as if we're going to maintain them better, they should last longer. But we need to set some kind of a date, not just saying every fleet piece that we've got now moving forward can go to that extended time frame.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So having said that, is it imperative that we pass this today, or could we delay it 2 weeks? Unfortunately, and I do apologize, I did not go back into the budget process and look at the budget for next year. And I would like some time to do that. And I know these vehicles need replaced, but I need to look at next year's budget before I give the okay for that. Having said that, how much do you think we'll get for the 2 old trucks? And would that go against this $600,000?
Through your worship, we've been fortunate enough to get, depending on the demand in the market and the quality of the vehicle, anywhere between $8,000 and $23,000 for each vehicle that we've sold recently. That money has just been placed into the fleet replacement reserve. The recognition really is that reserve would be used for emergency purposes for catastrophic events. So if something did fail and, you know, we needed $40,000 or $50,000, then there's money there to be able to do an emergency, you know, rebuild of a significant nature. Certainly, it's not like it's, you know, 30% of the value of the piece of equipment or anything like that. It's fairly small dollars.
And Councillor Bartley, just to reiterate, this is a committee of the whole decision at this point, so we will see it in 2 weeks' time for a decision.
Thank you, and I do apologize. I would have had that budget information, but I'm looking at the computer. I need to dig that up on.
Of course. All right. Anything further on this, Councillor Bell?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. At this point, I'm not interested in pre-approving $600,000. I just reflect back on where we began our budget deliberations for 2021, and there was quite a spread between council's desire for the tax rate increase, and with all of the things that all the departments of staff brought forward, we were apart by quite a lot, and I don't see that changing in the future. And so to give a pre-budget approval for $600,000, I'm not inclined to do that at this time, not knowing where we're going to go. Recognizing what Mr. Chapman has said about lead time to build new equipment, I understand that. Also, Mr. Chapman, you did say that if something goes down, we could be looking at some repairs. And I think that even if we have to buy a crate engine or something like that, or a new tranny, we're still going to be ahead of the game. And I do believe that we need to look at what our policy will read, knowing that we do have mechanics in our employment. And a comment that did come out just quickly about if we keep our mechanics for the future, I'm just not sure why we would change our mind now that we've stepped into that world of having mechanics, because this council has been giving money through the budget process to equip the mechanics with everything that they need. And now we're going to see more requirements in our budgets moving forward. So just with those thoughts, I I'm not inclined to vote on something to make approval on a totality that I don't know. So that's where I'm sitting this afternoon. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Councillor Bell.
Through your worship, I can note, just to make sure the council is aware, this isn't the first, like when it comes to plow trucks, this isn't the first time. I believe the last 3 truck purchases have been done using pre-budget approval because it is such an extended lead time. The alternative, of course, is that where we budget the $300,000 in 2022, or the $600,000 for the 2 of them in 2022, recognizing that we're going to levy that money in 2022, and we can guarantee that we are not going to spend it until the next year, because we just will not be able to get the truck in that period of time by the time the budget passes and it gets built.
Councillor Kentner. You're muted. Councillor Kentner, you're muted.
It just didn't want to click. Through your worship, Darcy, can you give us any idea of how long this kind of pricing is going to be available? In other words, you know, the trucks of this nature, you know, can it be appreciably more expensive to be ordering it a year or 2 years from now? That's my question.
Through your worship, that's a crystal ball that I just don't really have an opportunity to gaze through. I think like pricing for these things have, you know, continually gone up since I've been here. Not exponentially though. I mean, I think remembering back to, you know, 2013, 2014, it was probably 250 to 260,000. You know, now it's 300,000, 6-7 years later. So will we see, you know, a 5% increase? You know, if we waited a year, you know, maybe. I don't think that we're going to see the same price increases in the heavy duty fleet like we've seen in light duty trucks, where the pickup truck prices have just gone through the roof in the last 6 months. I don't think we're going to see that same volatility with the heavy duty. It's simply just a matter of timing.
Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Harley, you're muted.
Okay, how's that? All right.
That's better.
Sorry. 10 or 12 years ago, these trucks were about 235,000. But as far as the pre-ordering or getting our order in as soon as possible, this has been going on. We've had to do this now for 10 years because there's been delays, and even this this delay is certainly enough, but 1 year, that's been the norm for a long time. So if we want to play this game, we've got to go by the standards, and we're no different than any other municipality, and they're all suffering the same fate. So I'm inclined to go forward with this purchase. I don't think we're going to get any better price. We can sit here and discuss the mechanics situation for another hour. I don't think that's going to solve the fact that sooner or later, and I think preferably sooner, we need a couple of new big trucks. And we've had 4 quotes. They're all, I think, within about 5% of one another, and so I'm judging by that they're pretty credible quotes, and maybe we should move forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greenfield. Anything further? Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I fully understand the ramifications of not ordering these trucks. So having said that, I can go for it for today, knowing that we're not approving this till the next meeting, and by then I'll have some more information. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anything further from council on this? And Councillor Bell?
Just one further comment. So being in the trade that I'm in, I get some heavy duty equipment magazines delivered to me all the time. And I just have a basic question for the municipality to answer. Why is it that the municipality of Meaford always has to have brand spanking new equipment? When there's equipment out there, which is much newer in years, which is ready to go, it's equipped with everything we need. It's got the Viking plows and everything on it. And I've got a magazine in my hand right now. I just was leafing through it. And there's some equipment out there that are 2014s, 2018s, and they're looking at numbers of $250,000. And we could look at something which is not brand new. The only thing you get with brand new is what Mr. Chapman has said. You get a couple of year warranty. But I think that we should, when we have these reports come to us, I think we should have some people spend some time to look at some equipment out there that is in really good shape, and spend the time and go look at those pieces of equipment and come back with a report. So that's it's just another comment that I have, that it always seems that we have to have brand new.
Okay, thanks for that, Tony. And Councillor Bartley?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I tend to hear you, Councillor Bell, but if you've got a 2018 truck on the market for sale, you must have had an issue with it. It may have issues. Why else would you dump a 2018 on the market?
Through your worship, I think the other thing that I understand that this is the way that we operate is that every time we purchase one of these things, it's a significant cash outlay in the year that we purchase it. But the reality is, especially if council's going to go to a 15-year life cycle on new purchases, we're talking about $20,000 a year. So, you know, to Councillor Bell's point, it's a 2018, you know, it's probably put into service in 2017. It's at least 4 years old. You know, at $20,000 a year, that would be the equivalent of $220,000. So if they're selling it for $250,000, we're actually paying more than we would annually for a brand new vehicle that's fully warranted, that has 0 kilometers on it, that is ours from the start, and we know how it's being operated and maintained. So, you know, certainly our staff look at these things. We have a neighbor to the east of us that has recently undergone a significant change in their winter control because they had a contractor doing a number of routes, and that contractor didn't renew. So they had no choice but to go out and hire more staff and buy more equipment. And they had no choice but to buy used equipment. And much of that used equipment came with big headaches because they had no choice. They were under pressure. They couldn't wait for a year for new trucks to get built. And to Councillor Bartley's point, quite often used equipment comes with problems.
And Councillor Vickers?
I'm almost a little nervous to ask this question, but are we getting 2 trucks for 600,000 or each truck 600,000?
Through your worship, yes, the combined is 2 trucks together for the 595,000.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further from council? Then I will call the question for the recommendation that that this pre-budget approval move to the next stage, come back to council in 2 weeks. All in favor of this moving forward? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And those against? That is carried. COR 2021-16 is the 8th concession reconstruction tender. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the table? Councillor Kentner and Councillor Vickers, thank you. And back to you, Darcy, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Another tendering purchasing report. This one is both an in-year budgeted project and is also over budget. So we are requiring additional funds to complete this project. The price that came back seems fair compared to the competitive pricing that we received with the other bids. We were just under budget. There was also provisional items that were put into the tender, some of which we are recommending that we execute upon, and some of those we're not going to do, and we'll get our own forces to do. So we require an additional $99,000. That would come from the Roads and Drainage Reserve Fund. And as at the end of 2020, that reserve fund had about $610,000 in it. So it's got more than enough money to cover this shortfall. If you have any technical questions about the project, Tori's here to answer those.
Thank you. Councillor Vickers?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just Tori, like, is it increased costs? Like, was this, obviously you budgeted for, if I got it figured out right, 369,000, and the tender came in at over 400,000. Was it just, has prices gone up a lot? Like, is this a bit of a trend that we're seeing, or did we go wrong on our budget number?
Thanks for the question. Through Your Worship. So many of the items were within the our budgeted items for each of the types of work. One of the locations where there was a discrepancy was with the guide rails that will be installed for this project. So we will be working to see if there's alternative options that still meet the requirements for this road section, to see if there's some ability to reduce the costs that we received on that item.
So in a way, it wasn't, I guess we weren't out that much off the,
no,
off the
it was
budget.
on specific items that we definitely saw some variations. The other location where we saw some surprising increases were on those provisional items, and that is why we removed them. The costs they're looking to do work like ditching is significantly more expensive than we were anticipating and have seen in the past. And that's why we'll be proceeding with our own forces.
Okay, thank you, Tori. Deputy Mayor?
Thanks, Your Worship, and to you, Tori. So in doing the ditching ourselves, 2 to 3 weeks, I believe it suggests in the report, does that hamper the scheduling at all with other areas of ditching that were priorities for this year?
We will definitely have to prioritize this work because we will need to have it done prior to construction proceeding. The project isn't scheduled to start until the earliest of June 28th. So we definitely have some time to complete the work, but there is a fair amount of work to be completed. So we'll have to figure out which projects can be completed following this work, but essentially we'll work through our capital projects this year. We have a large number of roads where we're doing a second or work on our LCV roads. And so we'll have to prioritize which ones get completed and when they get completed throughout the season.
Councillor Greenfield.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Well, this is a very important road because there are some very important people who live on this road. It does need to be updated. Tori, it mentions somewhere in your report about raising a part of the road. Can you give us an idea of how many meters that'll be? Is that just a few meters, or is it a kilometer that's going to be raised? Can you give us an idea of how much will come up and how far up it would come?
These are great questions. As Jessica Wiley, the manager of transportation, is the one who's actually working directly on this project, I don't have the specific details on the location. I do know that there are 2 culverts within that area that if I recall correctly, are located a couple hundred meters apart. So it will be, I think, probably half a kilometer worth of road that requires more comprehensive reconstruction than the rest of the roadway, as we do see significant flooding in that area and poor drainage that impacts the roadway. And so we'll be fixing those issues. It isn't like it's a significant amount of reconstruction work that needs to happen because that base currently doesn't provide support to the asphalt surface that we do see on typical roads. And so that's all included in the cost of this work. And at the end of the day, we'll have a better product that will allow for the lifespan of this road to meet what we would assume see on other roads with an LCV surface.
Through your worship, if I can, just to help Tori out on this. So it's right through the swampy section, just under 300 meters in total in length. What they'll do is bust up the materials that are there, put the geotextile matting down, and add 18 inches of B gravel and 6 inches of A gravel. So the road's going to get lifted up about 2 feet, and there's that just under 300 meter length chunk through the swamp that's where it's going to be done.
Councillor Bartley? No, sorry, Kent. Sorry, Councillor Kentner.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just, I still don't quite understand, Mr. Chapman. Will they be removing the corduroy, the old lumber out of the, I'm assuming it's the corduroy portion that has to be lifted. And do they actually take out that base or not?
Through your worship, they don't. That's the whole point of the geotextile matting is that's what's going to help it to float on top of what's there and create some stability, and then you build the road up on top of that. And Tori might actually have some better technical wording other than float on top, but that's kind of the layman's terms for it.
Great explanation.
Anything further then? Councillor Kentner, you're all right?
Thank you.
Is there anything further from the rest of council? Seeing none, I will call the question then. All in favor of this reconstruction tender moving forward? And that is carried. And the next one is the Development Services DEV 2021-16, the 22nd side road purchase request. And it is noted that Deputy Mayor Keaveney has left the meeting for the moment. May I have a mover and a seconder, please, to put this on the table? Councillor Bartley, Councillor Greenfield, thank you. And Rob, over to you, please.
Thank you, Worship. So this is a public meeting that we held in February in relation to a request to purchase the north portion of the 22nd side road as it extends beyond the current limitation near the Roebuck campground. Just a bit of background. So this property was created through the dedication of a parcel of land to the municipality from Laverne Rogers, who owned the entire strip of parcel. What it did was it created a parcel of land that could only obtain access from the unopened portion. It was very clear in the report that we did in 2019 when the road was, when we took that dedication, that they would have to upgrade the road to municipal standards to obtain access to obtain a building permit. Earlier last year, council entered into an agreement for that road extension to provide the access to the property. But as the owners proceeded with getting the estimates for the work, they became quite concerned with the costs and then put this forward to council for consideration. At the public meeting, we heard concerns from the Roebucks with regard to the sale of the road allowance would cut off their access to the eastern portion of their property, in that the eastern portion is separated by a water course, and if in the future they wanted to get it access. We also heard from Robert Phillips, who owns land to the south of the subject parcel, who potentially would want access to build his house coming in off of this road as well. Following that, we did receive correspondence from both the Tom Thompson Trail Group, who utilizes this road allowance for the Tom Thompson Trail, and also the Snow Ridge or the Snow Runners Snowmobile Club, who also use it, expressing concerns or objections with regard to the sale of the road allowance. Just looking at, I know there were some discussions following the meeting or part of the meeting about the possibility of dividing it into 3 sections. So the north half, their driveway, up the middle would be the trail use, and then the south half would be to Mr. Phillips. The concern there is that we don't believe that you'd be able to get the 2 driveways and then the drainage, so the ditching and everything for those uses, plus the trail uses within a 66-foot road allowance. Plus it would look extremely awkward as you came up to the end of the road and seeing 3 separate uses that would be gated and not at the end of the road allowance. Plus it wouldn't deal with the Roebuck request of access that proposed. So we're recommending that we maintain the provisions that were previously established to extend the road. One of the things that we are suggesting in addition to that, though, is that council consider directing staff to look at a front-ending agreement. So that's where someone implements work that would benefit others, that when that person went to take advantage of those works, they would have to contribute in a similar fashion. Historically, we've used what we call best efforts agreements, where the municipality would endeavor to collect from future benefiting parties. Those don't really work and have presented problems in the past. So we're suggesting in this particular instance that a more formal front-ending agreement be utilized in this situation. It can't be done until the actual costs are known and that process is finalized. But council directing staff to bring that forward later is also in the suggestion that we have. So it's deny the request and then to do the section 326, in addition to confirming the current approval of building the road.
Thank you, Rob. Are there any questions for Councillor Bartley and then Councillor Greenfield?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Rob, on page 253, it says that the extension was to be pavement as per the existing section. It's not pavement up there, is it?
As far as I know, to the turnaround, it's hard surfaced, yes. What the agreement required them to do was extend the road in the same fashion that's existing. That was the requirement of our transportation team, mostly because you don't want to have 2 different types of equipment that are required to maintain 2 different types of road have to head up there. So it's whatever's existing would be extended. Okay,
and normally I wouldn't condone selling part of a road allowance because it would look a little different. But knowing that you can't go further east on this road because of the ravine, the municipality would never do it. I still think the 25 feet to either side and 16 feet up the center would work. I know I'm not an engineer, but I still think it would work, because now it's going to cost this lady $150,000 to put a laneway in. And I just think that's asking too much.
Okay. And Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Armstrong. I'm okay with the recommendation. I think that road is tar and chips. I think we just did work on it, I think last year or last couple of years ago.
Me too. Yeah.
So anyway, on our little map that we got, there shows some other smaller property to the east of the property in question. Is that another landlocked property further in, Rob, or what does that represent?
Yeah, through your worship, that's actually the parcel that was dedicated to the municipality it's the ravine that was dedicated to the municipality for the routing of the Tom Thompson Trail.
And Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. So there's a few things on this that to me, one is just moments ago, we approved $439,612 to do from what Tori said. We're probably looking at a distance of 500 meters kind of thing. The distance down there, what Councillor Bartley's just said, is going to be probably well in excess of $100,000. And I think asking the ratepayer to build a road to the municipal standards to do this, I reflected back in some council notes I had from a few years ago when Mr. Chapman had the portfolio of looking after the roads, and I got a cross section of a road construction, and it all came up with ratepayers north of Leith who live in through the bush area there, and they said, we'd like to have the municipal plow come in. And basically the word was, well, you build it to the standards, we'll come in. So asking the person who owns this property to build a road to our standards, I really do not like the request of us to do that. And then coupled with that, if they spend the money and they build this road, where's the plow going to turn around? Like how are they going to incorporate that building of that portion? And then those folks that use the trail itself in the summertime, they're going to be parking along there. So all of these things that these individuals are going to spend the money on, I need an answer for where's the plow going to turn around, and what can happen with people parking on the road ultimately and blocking even their entranceway. So I think I would really like to see us move in a direction where we could do a partial severing of this unopened road allowance in this case. Thanks.
Okay.
Through worship.
Over to you, Rob.
Yeah, so the agreement that was executed where they have to build the road to our standards requires them to also include a turnaround. So it's basically moving the existing turnaround further down the road allowance to do that. With regard to the parking, the main trailhead or the parking that exists for the Tom Thompson Trail is actually at the end of the 22nd side road on the 9th line. From what I'm aware of, that's where the existing parking spot is for as the trailhead.
Through your worship, just to further that, there's actually the trailhead parking is off of the county road as well on the one end, and at the other location that Mr. Armstrong just mentioned. As far as costing, that $439,000 actually does a significant amount of work on a stretch of road that's over 2 kilometers long, which includes, $70,000 worth of guide rail work and about $100,000 worth of work to try and build up a road through a swamp, neither of which is required in this area.
And I think the key thing to remind council is last year, council at her request entered into an agreement for her to extend the road to provide the access to the property. So you've already indicated that. You mentioned the 16 feet. Keep in mind, you're gonna have the travel portion and ditches on both sides because every individual person is going to have to take care of their own drainage because you can't share drainage in an individual situation. So I don't believe that you'll be able to get that within, pretty strongly believe that you won't be able to get that within the 66 feet. A road allowance, we're challenged with our own roads and ditches in 66 feet as well, so.
Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Your Worship. When these people bought this piece of property, would have they realized or been informed about the situation that they're in now?
Your Worship, I couldn't speak to that. I'm not too sure what they were or were not informed when they bought the property.
Councillor Kentner.
Through your worship, they would have done their due diligence, however, and it's hard to believe that they are in this situation, you know, unbeknownst to them. And I think we've had discussions about this kind of problem before. So I'm sort of support the motion at this point. Could you maybe explain a little bit more, Rob, about what the costs would be, like, or how likely they are to have their costs ameliorated through other property owners tapping into their construction?
Yes, thank you, Worship. So through your Worship, I understand it's about 150 to 180,000. I don't know the actual cost for them to upgrade the road. They did provide securities to the municipality that are in place, not the full cost, but we at the end of the day need to assume it as a public road for maintenance purposes and have to ensure it's built to the standards. That section 326 bylaw, what it does is gets registered on title of the adjacent properties. And in the event that they were to want an entrance from the road allowance that's improved by the Devons, they would have to pay. Those details would come back for council consideration on the sharing of those costs under that bylaw. It's very similar to what we just did for Lakeshore Road North, where we passed the bylaw and the charges are passed on to the residents.
Is there any further questions for staff? Just a procedural question for our clerk, Matt. What is or perhaps Rob, you can answer this. What would be the alternative should this not move forward at this stage?
I'm going to let Rob talk about what alternatives there are, and then I'll try and answer a procedural question, I think.
So the alternative, in my opinion, would be that council do grant or do concur with the sale of a portion of the road allowance as requested. I would request that I think we need to itemize some engineering details to determine the amount of land, and probably have to undertake some to look at what all of the uses would require from a design perspective. So I don't think we can commit until we had that. So I think probably the option B would to request engineering details on how the multiple uses could coexist if council wanted to go. But again, I strongly believe that that would just be a futile exercise in trying to fit something in that won't fit. And that really this is the way to go. But
thank you for that. Matt, you had something to contribute.
So as I see this, having to listen to the conversation and looking at the various resolutions, there's three options here. One is that committee of the whole passes this through and then it goes to council as the recommendation exists. One is that the committee of the whole votes against this, which would not be a good thing to do, because then this request dies but we also then haven't resolved anything particularly. The previous bylaw would still apply, but I think for your sake as council, you probably want to be clear about exactly what it is that you're intending to do. The third thing would be that a member of council can suggest an amendment to the motion to say that the text be replaced and the text be removed and replaced with direction to staff to investigate the practicalities of dividing the unopened road allowance into 3 portions. I very much agree with Rob that just saying the committee of the whole recommend council and the municipality of Meaford sell part of the road allowance would likely cause us more trouble than it's worth, because then we've got to get into that practicalities bit with the Tom Thompson Trail Group, with the southerly property owner, and so on and so forth. Because I think Rob's comment about the drainage is a really key one here. If we were to do that, either they'd all have to do their separate roadways, which would seem to be a little odd, or they'd all have to have drainage agreements with each other and indemnifying everything, and that will get very, very complicated. So really what I'm suggesting is either somebody makes a motion to amend this, or you vote on the motion that you've already got on the table.
Okay. Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And just to give you a little history on this, this thing. The lady was told that the road could be extended, and she didn't realize the cost of it, and henceforth why they come up with a separate plan. I can see the plan that going forward would cause all kinds of issues. We've got a very time-sensitive thing on this. She has her house ordered. It's a log house. The logs are ordered and their logs are coming. She needs a building permit. Is it possible, and I'm speaking out of turn here, out of text without even talking to the lady, is it possible to have the same agreement that we did on Lakeshore Boulevard with extending this road, where it hits her taxes instead of her outlaying the money? Is that at all possible?
I suspect Darcy or Rob might want to comment on this.
Yeah, because it's public work, it's actually a municipal road allowance that she's upgrading. We've done this in numerous locations in the community where someone's extended a public road so they can get access to it. I think the different agreement that would be used is this one I'm speaking, the front ending, where they do it and we front end it. Versus the financing of it, I don't know. I need to, well, I'd have to look to Darcy on that one. It's, I don't think it really applies in the situation, but.
Through your worship, I guess 2 comments. First, if it's going to cost $180,000, I'm not sure that the property as it is right now without that entrance is worth $180,000. So the municipality would be putting an encumbrance on a property that if it actually, they didn't pay, then we're not even going to get the money back if we had to go through a tax sale proceeding. So I would never suggest doing that. The second thing we have to recognize is you can't think of this individual as an individual. You have to think of this as property that is being opened for development. And my question to you would be, if a developer came to council asking for money to open up a road to allow for residential housing to be constructed, would council front end and finance that project? Because that's what's effectively going to be asked if you guys go down that kind of a road. No pun intended.
Okay. Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and thanks to Matt on his suggestion. We could do your suggestion, Matt, when it comes back before council. We don't necessarily have to have an amendment today on it. We could get this moved on to council, and we could come up with that in 2 weeks' time.
You could, and if that was going to happen, if you were going to pass it through committee of the whole today, at least what I would have ready is a potential motion if anybody needed it.
That's right. Are we ready to call the question on this at this point? I'm not seeing any no's. So therefore, I will call the question. All in favor of moving this recommendation on to the council meeting next in 2 weeks? All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, and that is carried. Thank you. Interesting discussion. So moving on now to updates from members appointed to outside committees. And the first one, Deputy Mayor Keaveney, are you back with us? We give her a quick heads up that we are finished this discussion. Margaret, perhaps you could let Deputy Mayor know that we're back in session for her.
Perhaps, Madam Mayor, while you're waiting for that, you might like to do a motion to extend.
Yes, in fact, that's exactly what we should do. 4:30. Please could I have a motion to extend? Councillor Vickers and Councillor Bartley, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. And welcome back, Deputy Mayor. We're moving into updates from members, and you were hot off the press here for County Council.
Thank you, Your Worship. And an update from County Council. Council met virtually at the call of Warden Hicks on March the 11th. This was the first Grey County Council meeting to be broadcast on Rogers TV, so good to see that happening. It was also the first reading by Warden Hicks of the newly approved land acknowledgement message. There were several messages of good news on that Thursday. We've talked about Meaford's vaccine clinic. Owen Sound has branded itself as the work from home capital of Canada, which I think is quite brilliant. And they've also renamed their downtown core the River District. The first local virtual job fair took place on March the 10th with 125 businesses registered, and they connected with job seekers in over 2,000 chats. 884 interviews were arranged with people looking for employment, so very successful indeed. The Grey County Transit System will be extended to Sauble Beach with the additional route from Owen Sound to Wyerton to Sauble being funded by South Bruce Peninsula. That Thursday, March the 11th, also marked an important anniversary. Agnes McPhail's first election. She was born in Grey Highlands, and Agnes was the first woman elected in Canada, which is very exciting. And this year is also the 100th anniversary of ferry service to which is now operated by the Chi-Chi-Mon out of Tobermory. Mike Baker presented on behalf of the Wood Manufacturing Cluster of Ontario. This not-for-profit organization began as the Blue Water Wood Alliance in 2010 through the Grey County Incubator process, so another big success story. It now has over 120 companies as members who contribute $6.3 billion in their sector in Ontario, so pretty significant. Grey County Council heard from the Economic Development Department with their first quarter work plan update. Two major projects underway within that department are determining the value of further investment in the Wyerton Airport and also determining the same for the Talisman property project. Staff are heavily engaged in the local immigration partnership project, working with international students in particular, helping them to feel welcome and encouraging them to stay in Grey County. The Business Enterprise Center has been incredibly busy during the pandemic. There has been a real uptick in the number of entrepreneurs opening new businesses, and we talked about that earlier. We're seeing that here in Meaford too. And interesting that a lot of them are choosing brick and mortar locations as opposed to online operations or inclusive of online operations. Catapult Grey Bruce, our local business accelerator, has also been busy matching mentors and entrepreneurs. Council had a presentation from MPAC. In 2020, there was a 37.3 billion with a B new assessment across Ontario. MPAC has worked hard to keep up with assessments so municipalities can collect the taxes from these new builds and renovations. MPAC does not know at this time when the next assessment date will be. It will happen sometime after the province releases its next budget. MPAC is still basing their assessments on 2016 evaluation numbers. Municipalities provide information to MPAC through their building permit processes, and new assessments are based on this data. The county will again utilize the services of BDO for their annual audit needs. Additional funding has come to Grey County Social Services Department from the Provincial Social Services COVID Relief Fund. These dollars will be used to create more emergency housing for women in Owen Sound at this point in time. And that's it, Your Worship, unless there's anything you'd like to add.
Well done. You covered it all. Thank you. Heritage Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, our committee has been very busy of late, and I think we're going to continue to be that way. And I think it was, I was pleased that the Heritage Committee's experience formed an important part of the discussion at our public meeting on advisory committees last Friday. So I feel that the solutions that were recommended have been working for us so far, and I hope will continue to. And therefore, I hope they're just as efficacious for the other public advisory committees.
Thank you for that. And Parks Advisory Committee. Steve?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We did have a meeting for the Parks Advisory Committee, and I guess the biggest thing and the only thing that came out of this meeting was that we unanimously adopted that a lot of what AMP wants to go into the master plan, we adopted most of the suggestions towards the master plan. And we're going to get a report back on how that would proceed. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And over to you, Councillor Bell, for the BIA report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So there was conversation at the last meeting about the patio guidelines, which have just been passed. They feel comfortable with that. There was talk about the Sykes Street reconstruction. They know that that's going to make an impact. Market Square came up again. I think out of that one, the comments out of that for them is that they're looking for one or two anchor tenants, as it were, that when it's promoted, that they could have, you know, a food truck. There'd be something. They were tossing around a lot of ideas. So they're looking for a couple of good anchor tenants. From my aspect at the next meeting, just so that everyone knows, coming out of the meeting that council went through on Friday, I will be speaking to the group at some point and simply stating that instead of using terminology of forming subcommittees, for instance, this one about looking into having a tenant, an anchor tenant, that to me is an example of where I'm going to suggest to the chair and to the group that they just use that as a job tasking, that they get one or two people out there just to look into that. And I think that that's going to cause some good conversation to be had at the BIA for our next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone that I've missed or would have something to contribute? Seeing none, I'll have a motion, please, to move out of the committee of the whole. Deputy Mayor and Councillor Bartley, thank you. All in favor? And that is carried. Are there any notices of motion to come forward? No. Yeah. Oh, Councillor Vickers.
Yep. I'd like to give notice that I will be bringing forward a notice of motion regarding getting final reports from some of the major expenditures, whether it be road, bridges, or facilities. I'll go with staff and Darcy and I have done a little bit of talking about it, and we'll try and put something together to bring a formal motion forward. But that is my intent.
Okay, super, thank you. And that brings us to a motion for decision brought forward by Councillor Kentner regarding the Tobogganing Hill. Councillor Kentner, will you move this one?
I will, thank you.
And could I have a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor? All right. Councillor Kentner, did you want to speak to this?
Just speak very briefly to it. I think that our experience, it was a short winter, but the Beautiful Joe Park was used very, very extensively for tobogganing. A lot of parking on the hill around the corner of reconstructed Edmund Street, creating lots of challenges. And I think too that we all recognize that Beautiful Joe Park is not the safest tobogganing hill either. So this resolution is just to ask staff to take a look at the possibilities of leasing an appropriate hill from a private person in the community somewhere, or looking at advancing plans for a toboggan hill at the Center Street Park, which is off in the distance for development, but perhaps it might be possible to move forward with a tobogganing hill there in the foreseeable future. I'm thinking of the next winter. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a private property that might be constitute of toboggan hill?
In the back of my mind, when I said that, I was really thinking of our deputy mayor's old homestead, because it was a ski hill at one time. But I was also thinking, I've heard scuttlebutt about a number of locations in town having been used in the past, and one I think is somewhere around the fairgrounds. So I really don't know, but I'm hoping that it wouldn't take too much effort to discover some options.
Was that Suicide Hill?
I don't know. Is that what it was called?
That's one of the most dangerous hills in Meaford.
Yeah. All right, any further? Deputy Mayor?
Your worship, thank you. And I will share that I grew up tobogganing on Suicide Hill and lived to tell the story. But yeah, there is a great hill up above the fairgrounds, and that's a pretty quiet street with a bit of a curve there at the top of that hill that would better accommodate parking perhaps than Beautiful Joe. But my question for Councillor Kentner is whether or not you would consider a slight amendment or addition to your motion to include staff considering some alternatives to parking at Beautiful Joe, because I think even though we may and likely will designate another hill, somehow I think folks will still also want to utilize Beautiful Joe just because it's walkable and it's a great little hill for kids. So I'm wondering if you'd entertain, in addition to this, to have staff look at alternative parking options for Beautiful Joe.
I would certainly do that, but I think that Mr. Chapman would like to speak to it.
And Mr. Smith was first. Matt?
I'll actually let Darcy talk about what other options there are, because I'm going to talk about some enforcement stuff.
Okay, thank you. Over to you, Darcy.
So through your worship, if we're simply talking about parking in the area, we can probably expedite phase 1 of the Legion Park upgrades. I believe that was around $250,000 to $300,000, and that would establish all the parking at the Legion Park property, which is in close proximity. I should note that we've got about $960,000 in the Recreation Development Charge Reserve Fund. So if Legion Park was a development project that we wanted to do, it could be, the majority of it could be funded through that. Phase 1 of Center Street is about $1 million, And again, we have almost $1 million in the DC Reserve Fund, so we could fund in large part that project. What I actually wanted to talk about was that I really, really need council, and this is coming from the hat of being the person in charge of risk management for the organization. I need council to immediately cease and desist recognizing Beautiful Joe as a toboggan area. It is not the municipality's toboggan hill. It is not where we want to send people. It has not been engineered for that purpose. It is, our insurers actually told us that we should not be doing it because there is significant risk there. So to ensure that the municipality doesn't find itself in a liability position where we have no way to get out of this, please do not refer to this as the toboggan hill anymore.
My comment, Madam Mayor, was just to add to the conversation about Legion Park there. As you know, we'll have to bring forward a new parking bylaw within the next month to 6 weeks because we need it in order to be able to deal with the paid parking program pilots. One of the things that I'm doing as part of that bylaw is reviewing our parking restrictions, and I will be bringing forward for council's consideration a suggestion that we should make that part of Edwin Street a no parking zone because of the number of complaints that we've had about parking in that area. So I just want to get that in council's sort of head right now so that we can have a conversation about that when it comes up, but that will be a staff recommendation.
Councillor Greenfield and then Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Chapman. Very, very excellent point. Beautiful Joe Park was never originally created for people to toboggan or sleigh ride down from Edwin Street into the parking lot. It was created in the memory of Beautiful Joe, the book, a wonderful story. And I'm afraid the tobogganing, and hey, look, when I was a kid, even a big kid, I enjoyed tobogganing, but it's not a toboggan hill. I'm good with the recommendation. As long as going ahead and creating a hill up on the Center Street site does not interfere with the future development of that property. I'm not sure that we have a master plan as far as a layout for that property. As to parking and the entranceway, washrooms, trails, outside pickleball, maybe. I just don't want to jump the gun on creating a toboggan hill up there, or sledding hill, whatever you want to call it, and then in a couple of years have to go back and say, oh, maybe we should have arranged this a little differently. So maybe Mr. Chapman could help me out on that part. Thank you.
Through your worship, it's probably just due to a COVID fog from the last year, but council actually did pass the master plan for Center Street about a year ago, which included the toboggan hill, trails, interpretive areas, parking, pickleball, pretty much everything that Councillor Greenfield mentioned, with the exception of washrooms. And that's only because one thing that the Ministry of Environment made very clear during our consultation process was that we could not put permanent structures on the site because of it being a former landfill. So you couldn't actually put like foundations in place or anything. So other than, we can have portables there, of course, but we can't have permanent washrooms. But there is a plan, and as part of that plan, the first phase of that plan, which I said is about $1 million, includes the establishment of the entrances, the parking, a main trail that would go all the way back down to the river. So it would, that parking lot could also act as like trailhead parking for the trail loop. And then, of course, also the toboggan hill as well.
Thank you. Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and I appreciate Councillor Kentner. You're trying to do something for the youth of our community and for families. That was on my mind when I brought forward my notice of motion, which council supported, about going out to the location that's been just talked about there and spending some money in doing that. I think that what we probably should do is put an energy behind getting that tobogganing hill at the former landfill site. And I know that in the next winter, there will be the same problem as what you have mentioned, Councillor Kentner, as what we experienced this winter. So unfortunately, with what Mr. Chapman has just reinforced to all members of council about us not saying that the Beautiful Joe location is a tobogganing hill, I think then it behooves the municipality next winter that if it's not allowed and our insurance carrier really is stressing that we don't have that activity, unfortunately, that's going to have to be policed. And we know how telling our ratepayers what they cannot do does not go over very well. But then to protect ourselves, I think we're going to have to look at that next winter. I do reflect, though, with a little bit of jocularity with Councillor Vickers when I did suggest the tobogganing hill at Center Street, that if you recall, Councillor Vickers, I think you said to me, you appreciated my youthful heart and my thinking, but if you recall, you further said, do you really think you're going to get a lawyer and an engineer to create a slope of, I think you said, greater than 1 degree? Do you remember that? Because I certainly do, and it is quite true when we enter into the world of, liability. So I hope that we can do something. I hope that we can do something in a more timely fashion. And I do take to heart what you said, Mr. Chapman, and I do bear that in mind. But I do thank you, Councillor Kentner, for trying to do something in the short term.
Councillor Vickers.
Through your worship, and Tony, I hopefully I didn't offend you too much that day, but I think it still holds true. So I think Matt has given us a very good suggestion, and I'm just concerned about requesting staff to do work on a project until we have a more of an idea where we want to go with it. Just to put something out there that they need to bring a report back, I think it's a bit too general for me to send it to staff the way it is right now. So those are some of my thoughts. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thanks. And over to you, Councillor Kentner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm certainly prepared to take out the reference to renting a hill and put all the emphasis onto a report that deals with advancing plans to develop a tobogganing hill on Center Street. I think one of the advantages of that, it's not that far from Beautiful Joe Park. And if it is, a real challenge and something that excites people, then I'm sure they can make the transition from Beautiful Joe Park up there. And just a final point for Mr. Chapman, there is on the internet a page that talks about Beautiful Joe as being Meaford's tobogganing hill. And so if you're concerned about liability, I think that we need to take steps to get that taken down. I had nothing to do with it. I have no idea where it came from, but if liability is your concern, then we need to deal with that, I would say. Thank you.
Through your worship, I do appreciate that. I understand that it's out there. We were made aware of it during the height of the winter. We immediately contacted that organization and advised them to remove the page because it was not something that we actually approved for them to advertise.
So, Mr. Clerk, Matt, I have a concern about the wording of the motion as it goes forward, with the statement that that Beautiful Joe is growing in popularity for tobogganing. I'm wondering whether there should be some revision, perhaps with the author's consent, of course, in terms of just the terminology there, given Darcy's very strongly worded and appropriate comments about not promoting Beautiful Joe as a tobogganing hill.
We certainly can. I'm not particularly worried in terms of that from Darcy's point of view. Well, I don't know Darcy's point of view, but I'm not particularly worried about it from that point of view, in the fact that it just says it's growing in popularity, which it is. There's nothing, there's no doubt that that is a fact. It's certainly not saying that it's the municipality's place where we want the tobogganing to happen. What I've also been doing as the conversation's gone on, to Councillor Kentner's last point about sort of focusing in on the Centre Street property, what we could do here, if Councillor Kentner and whoever the seconder was were keen, was to replace both of the two enacting clauses, that's the last two clauses in the motion, with something that says, therefore be it resolved that Council of the Municipality of Meaford direct staff to bring forward a report for Council's consideration regarding the potential immediate implementation of the Phase 1 plan for the Centre Street site.
Okay, thank you for that, Matt. And we'll go back to the mover, Councillor Kentner.
I would be perfectly happy with that. Thank you.
Thank you. And what about you, the Deputy Mayor? You seconded it.
Fine by me.
Fine by you. Okay. Are there any further comments then to the motion as amended? So the motion then would carry on all the way through till the last paragraph.
So
Matt?
the first 4 paragraphs up to increase the danger of accidents or a pedestrian being struck would remain the same. The last 2 paragraphs will be deleted and replaced with the words that I've just read.
All right. Is that clear for everyone? All right. Then I will call the question. All in favor as amended? All in 1, 2, 3. Those against? That is carried. All right. Moving into the adoption of the minutes for council meeting March the 8th, 2021. Is there a mover and a seconder for that, please? Yeah, Deputy Mayor and Councillor Vickers. Are there any comments or errors or omissions on that? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried. Moving into the closed meeting, March the 8th. Mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Bell, Councillor Bartley. And are there any comments? Do we need to, if there are, we have to go into closed again, but seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried. Is there anything in the communications list that anyone wishes to pull? Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a couple of questions from C.
On C, okay. Is there anything else from council? Okay, seeing none, then we will have a look at the letter from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs regarding COVID-19 funding. That's the one you wish to pull? Councillor Vickers, yes. Did you have a comment or question?
Yes. So my question is, I think it got down to the bottom. It talks about, is this money received for money that we've spent already, or is it money that will be allocated to projects that we have in the future? Because if you read it towards the end, by signing below, I acknowledge the allocation is provided to the municipality of Meaford for the expected purpose of assisting with COVID-19 costs and pressures. So is it costs already incurred, or is it giving us money that we could spend it on COVID related items?
Rob or Darcy? Either one.
I think the best way is, so we, through the budget process, we set up a COVID account for our expected cost to deal with COVID for 2021. That very statement is, it would be applied to those. So it's both what we've done already to date, plus a potential for the rest of the year to implement all the provisions related to COVID. Darcy has anything further to that?
Yes, through your worship. It says right at the bottom where Councillor Vickers was talking about that if we do not require all the funds, we need to save it for the next year. So we can't just use it for any other purpose. So we'll have to do an accounting through 2020 and then also through 2021 with regards to what it's cost us relating to COVID and then the funding that we've used. And if we don't use everything we're given, we have to save it for the next year to help mitigate costs at that stage of the game. So it really, they're saying it can only be used for COVID. And if you don't use it all in year, you have to save it for the following year.
So is this basically money that's been announced before? This is kind of being re-announced then? Would that be a good way to describe it? Or is this kind of money that we've received before doesn't include this?
Through your worship, this is new money. So we received $350,000 or $362,000, I think, in 2020 for COVID related measures. Okay. This is a further $106,000 on top of that. So this was a new announcement just in January of this year.
Okay. Anything further, Councillor Vickers? You're all right with that? Okay. Then that has been received as presented, and we'll move on to a confirming bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the council of the municipality of Meaford at its regular and special meetings held in the month of March 2021 be taken as read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. Can I have a mover? Councillor Bell, I saw your hand up, and Councillor Greenfield. All in favor? And that is carried. And that brings us to the end of this meeting and completed agenda. Thank you all very much for your contributions and your work on this. And I will declare this meeting adjourned. Thanks very much, everyone. Good night.
Good night.